9 o'clock, we'll call the Tuesday, April 24th, 2018 Board of Commissioners meeting to order. Roll call will show that all commissioners except Commissioner Lenzmeyer are present. Please join me in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our first item is always a public access forum. Is there anyone here that wishes to speak at the public access forum? Okay. Anyone wishing to address the board on issues not found on today's agenda may do so at this time. Speakers are asked to approach the microphone. Individual comments are limited to 3 to 4 minutes. Total allotted time for this forum is 10 minutes. A citizen may speak at the public access forum once per month. County board members will not engage in dialogue with speakers, but rather refer the matter to the appropriate county department. Okay, please give your name and address, please.
I am Victor Leggett. I gave you all handouts here. My address is 10781 385th Street of St. Joseph. I got a contact phone number there also. I'm in Section 33 in Brockway Township. My concern is I have a neighbor that constructed a dam. The second page that I've got in front of you shows the natural way of the water had run. The blue that I've got highlighted there along Township Road 385th Street indicates where he constructed this berm or dam in a natural waterway backing up water onto my property. The following page I have showing the elevations. The elevation of the culvert is at 1172.4, and his dam is at 1174. He replaced the natural waterway with a 6-inch tile. There's about 20 acres of watershed that falls into that area. 6-inch tile does no way or form replace a natural swale, because a 6-inch tile will not take water after a heavy rain event, or even like the snow melt here this spring. The water is forced over 1174 elevation. You go back to that map that I have showing the yellow line to the south of 385th Street, indicating that the elevation is 1174. It is no longer 1174 because the water was forced over 1174 into my property, and I get a fair amount of water in my meadow and on my field to begin with. Now, I'm dealing with additional 20 acres of watershed that falls into that area. I took videos and stuff, which I do not have along today, of what has happening. In January of this year, the next page, I run across an ordinance that the county has, J&K, where it says here, digging, excavating, placing culverts, placing dams, or doing any act which may alter or affect the damage of a public road or affect the flow of public storms, sewers, ditch, or drainage ways without authorization from the county. You have an ordinance, prohibiting somebody from doing what my neighbor has done. Some years ago, I had the township, because in 2008, Dennis constructed that dam within the road right away. Well, he moved it outside the road right away. Town board said it's out of our jurisdiction. There's nothing we can do about it because it's out of the road right away. Well, I seen this ordinance that the county has. The next page I have the township ordinance, saying basically the same thing as what the county has. So I had George Fiddler out there, and George had told me, he said, it certainly looks like we have to act on it. So they drafted a letter to force him to remove that berm. And they sent it over to Township Attorney Bob Rupe. Bob Rupe told the township not to get involved. That's why I'm here today. you guys have an ordinance here prohibiting somebody from doing what Dennis has done, and he's been flooding me out. I asked that the county step in and force that berm to be removed to back where the way it was. So it's not affecting my property. He simply closed a natural swale, haul fill in, so he could farm efficiently across that ditch, which was a grass way that was 40 feet wide. And to gain an acre and a half of land. But now I am suffering the consequences because of that.
Thank you. Shelley, do you have a copy of this? Did you give, Shelley, do you have a copy of this handout?
No, but I'm certainly aware of the situation and I know where his property is. Mr. Leggett has called our office. This is something we'll have to discuss with the county attorney's office process.
Okay, thank you.
The following page has the same language about backing water up onto neighboring properties. That I got from the township at one of the township meetings. And the last page was this will send out to township residents. And they got the language in here, you know, they don't want farmers farming within the road right of way, which I can understand that where there's issues and stuff. But it also says causing erosion, blocks, culverts, alters the flow of water, causing standing water. Because I told the township at the last township meeting, I said, why did you guys even bother sending this out? This was out before the last annual meeting in February. I said, when you don't even abide by your own ordinances. I mean, get rid of the ordinance if you're not going to follow ordinance. That doesn't make any sense whatsoever to me. And why should I be burdened from water that should have followed a natural waterway? I guess that's all I have, hoping that somebody bellies up and takes care of the problem. I know some of you county commissioners have been out. You know what I'm talking about. You've been there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Shelley, you will.
We'll look into that and address that.
Is there anyone else that's here for the public access forum? Anyone else for a public access forum? Seeing no one else, we'll go to the consent agenda. Commissioners, what are your feelings of the consent agenda?
I'll move approval of the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, we are to environmental services. Shelley.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Shelley Benson, Environmental Services Director. We have our consent agenda first.
I'd like to. I'll move the consent agenda.
It's been moved. Is there a second?
I'll second.
I'd just like to pull item number 3 for discussion.
Okay.
Should we go ahead and vote the other ones in?
Commissioner Notch, you made the motion. What are your?
I guess I was okay with them all, but if you want to discuss it now.
We can discuss it. Fred.
Well, okay. Well, I do want to discuss it, so.
Okay.
Yeah, all right.
Becky Schlorf is here to discuss that specific item, number 3.
Okay. Becky, I'll just tell you my concerns. If we take a look at page 67, I don't know if we can pull that up on the screen from our agenda. Try that once.
No idea. I'm not sure how to do that.
I can try to get a document camera.
Oh. Page 67.
Okay. I got a number of concerns. It's just that the size of the, yeah, there we go. And then I want maybe number 7. So let's just pull that up if we can. You can see the size of the barn is going. They're going from about 125 animal units to around 600 animal units. Is that correct, Becky?
Let's see here. Sorry, give me a minute here. From 129.8 animal units which would be in this area, with an addition of 478 animal units with the proposed barn number 8 for a total of 607.8.
And I'm not concerned about this, the increase, other than its the location of the barn. You can see that both to the east and to the west, there's a creek, Becky, you can show, on both sides of the barn there. And it does come into a setback that would exist, I believe, for new buildings to come into the area, had it not been for the fact that they have a barn that is within 80 feet of the existing barn that's within 80 feet of the creek, correct?
Correct. So the current closest point is right here, and that is 80 feet from the stream. And feedlots are allowed no further encroachment by state law and county ordinance. And the proposed barn is going to be 110 feet. The setback for any new feedlot would be 300 feet.
Yeah. So, and the size of the farm is how large? 150 acres?
The acreage for the entire parcel, I don't think I have that information. It wasn't in the staff report.
Okay. Anyway, there seems to be enough room for that. My concern is, of course, putting it that close with the restriction that would be if it would be new construction. Also, the city of St. Martin gathers their water from that area. I think there's another.
Yep, that was on this
Picture
map
that
as
you have
well.
as well.
So the pink or purplish area is the moderate vulnerability for the drinking water supply management area of the city of St. Martin.
And then just the size of the building, it's going to be about over an acre, and you've got that much impervious surface, and that water coming off the roof, draining in one direction, I think has potential to have direct runoff right into the creek, which could lead to a washout, and then just continually be in a direct flow into the creek. I would rather have it flow at least forward. It would at least go into the soil rather than directly run off. But it was approved by the Planning Commission to move forward with this project. However, I've got some concerns that I think we could probably do a little better than that. My sensitivity is just that we sit at the top of the watershed. 20 million people drink out of the Mississippi River, and looking forward, barn's going to be here for decades, and I just think we can do a little better than we have in this plan. So.
And
Becky, do you have any more comments?
Mr. Chair, and to address some of Commissioner Persky's concerns, we did get clarification from the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency yesterday and they are the entity, they do have the jurisdiction for issuing this particular feedlot permit, even though we're delegated, and that is because it is within the drinking water supply management area and over 500 animal units. But their clarification did let us know that the stormwater pollution prevention plan, or a SWIP, will be required for the facility. They will have to maintain that on site. And because it is over an acre of new impervious, they will also be required to do a permanent stormwater management plan, so that might include a vegetated infiltration area. So that is something that the state will be working with the applicant on.
Commissioner Merrick.
So the issues that were raised by Commissioner Persky are going to be addressed either locally or through the state?
Through the state. Right now, it would just be through the state. They
Okay.
require the SWIP. It's not required to be submitted or reviewed, but it is required, and it is required to be maintained on site.
So it's going to be an ongoing review?
My understanding from the state is that they do not review the plan, that although this one they might, because there is required to have some permanent stormwater management. As far as inspections, they go out if it's convenient for them. Otherwise, they don't have plans to go out on site. So that is how they operate with their priorities.
So would it be appropriate for us to make a request that they do an ongoing or some type of a review rather than just at the beginning, once a year or once every 2 years? Is that appropriate or not?
If the concern is ongoing long-term stormwater management, that will likely be addressed through the SWIP. And my one option would be to submit or file a complaint with the state if something is not looking to be handled appropriately. A condition to have staff review it on an annual basis, which I believe is what you were saying.
Well,
or-
I'm not sure if it should be staff. I'm just thinking there should be some type of a follow-up. So 5 years down the road, or, I mean, you know, rather than just say, yes, it's okay now, everything, all conditions are taken care of. So I'm not saying somebody should be out there every day watching, but some type of a follow-up, and maybe it's on a complaint basis that's handled.
Yeah, that's
And I
always,
guess that would address my concern, I think, but if there's something more that we could do, that would be even better.
Commissioner Notch.
The feedlots are inspected every so many years, correct?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Notch, the feedlots are inspected on a request basis or a complaint basis, and then we also have some other triggers related to record keeping. But we're not on a rotation like we were years ago, where it was
Okay.
once every 4
So I
years
was gonna
related
say,
to
if you're on that
registration.
rotation, you're gonna be
Yeah.
out there anyway.
Yeah, in this case, no, we would, and because we're not the jurisdiction to do the state feedlot permit on this unique situation, we would not be out there for a post-construction visit either. This is all going to be the state's responsibility.
Commissioner Persky.
I would be comfortable if we would just get a copy of the paperwork from the state. Is that possible? And then just have somebody take a look that the work's been completed. I would be fine with that. if
Yeah,
that's
and
possible.
And Mr. Chair, Commissioner Persky, if you're just stating that as a blank statement and not as a condition, that's certainly feasible.
Can we put it in as a condition? Just so that we know that.
Sure,
That it
yep.
would then get followed up on.
What that would do is if that's not followed up with, then, you know, the whole non-compliance with the CUP and bringing it back to Planning Commission, that would be the option
Okay.
available if it were a condition.
Okay. Would you folks be okay with that?
I'd be okay with it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is that something that we need, are we able to incorporate that into the consent agenda, or do we have to have a separate action on this particular item?
I think my understanding was that you pulled it from the consent agenda?
Correct.
or-
No,
But-
they
but-
We
are
didn't
Oh,
pull
not
it,
officially?
still on.
Well, just for discussion.
I
Yeah.
think, my understanding is if it's not following exactly what the Planning Commission recommended, that you might want to pull it from the consent
Okay.
agenda and handle it separately.
Okay, I'll amend my motion.
Make that amendment, yeah.
Okay.
I'll amend my motion and pull.
Okay, and I'll second.
Okay. Motion has been amended and seconded. Are we, any further discussion? Are we ready for a vote? All in favor, signify with aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion
Okay.
carries. Okay, so now we're back to item 3.
Okay. I'd like to move that with item 3, we amend it with having that paperwork, again, copy coming to the county, and then also a follow-up visit to see that there's compliance to the requirements.
I'll second that.
Okay, moved and second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, no. Commissioner Notch?
So we're not the controlling agency, so to follow up with compliance wouldn't necessarily, I don't think should be our condition. I think, as you stated before, getting a copy of it to make sure we have it. Would
Mr.
be
Chair,
appropriate.
Commissioner Notch, a follow-up visit would essentially only provide us with the means of potentially filing a complaint with the state.
Commissioner Persky?
And then my point would be is, you know, a one-time visit would tell us that it's okay, and then we don't have to come back out there again. We're fine with the way it was done.
Okay?
Anything else? Seeing none, all in favor, signify with aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, we are now to item D. Or do we have this JITA properties? Was that under the consent agenda?
No, that should not be under consent.
Okay,
Mr.
where does
Chair.
that fit in?
Mr. Chair, that will come after they go through the variance process and make that determination. Then that item can come back here.
So we aren't dealing with this today?
Correct.
Okay.
So there's
thank
some
you.
more process prior to that other item from Planning Commission.
Okay, thank you.
So we are on item D1, which is the public hearing to consider assessing delinquent refuse accounts.
Okay, do you want to give us an overview?
So essentially, you set the public hearing on March 27th of 2018. All applicants, as you can see, that are attached, all those parties are received notice. They are allowed to discuss any concerns they have with the Delinquent Refuse Appeal Board. And then anyone after that process has an opportunity here at the public hearing. They've all received notice to come and discuss any concerns that they have related to any appeals for the delinquent refuse accounts that they have. There are 3 vendors, hauler vendors, that are on our list this time. Danny's Reliable, but the bulk is still with Becker's City Sanitation. They have been bought out, and we suspect this is kind of the last push of items that we have going through.
They will have a name change too then?
I do not know. I'm going to look to Paula.
Yes, they did have they changed it to come up here, Waste Management Stock Center. So that name change was effective as, I believe, as of the
I think you need to speak into the microphone.
Yep. You can state your name and then tell them what you just told them.
Hi, I'm Paula Sexton. And yes, Waste Management, Becker's was bought out by Waste Management. I believe that the name change was effective as of the end of the year. These were from prior to that end of the year.
Okay, thank you. Anything else?
That's it, and we'll just hold the public hearing and see if anyone has any questions or concerns.
All right, we will, at this point, open the public hearing. Is there anyone that has any questions or concerns? Please approach the microphone, give your name and address. Anyone wishing to speak at this public hearing? Third call, anyone wishing to speak at the public hearing? Seeing no one, public hearing is closed. Okay, Board, what are your wishes?
I'll move the recommended action.
It's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Okay, the next items we have, E1, Jennifer Buckentine is here to go through those agenda items. They are rezoning applications that were brought forward.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Morning.
This request was submitted by Ed and Dana Polly of Cold Spring. They are requesting to rezone 10 acres from agricultural 40 to R5. Their property is in section 15 of Wakefield Township. The Planning Commission conducted the public hearing last week. They did recommend approval unanimously of the rezoning. They felt it was compatible with the county's comp plan, the present and future land uses, and the township also supported the request as well. So I guess the recommended action would be to either concur or not concur with the Planning Commission recommendation and then approve or deny Ordinance 575.
I'll move the recommended action and approve the ordinance 575.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 2.
That is our aquatic invasive species plan revision, and we have a few parties here. Yep.
Good morning, Commissioners. Becky Schlorf, the Ag and Water Division Supervisor. Today, this is going to be giving you an update on the aquatic invasive species for 2017, as well as looking for your approval for a plan revision for 2018 and beyond. I have Sue McGuire here from Environmental Services, and then Kevin Farnham from the Aquatic Invasive Species Committee.
Good morning.
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 I have 2 documents, a revised AIS plan for the county and a report on the AIS prevention activities in 2017. We updated the plan to reflect what we've learned in the past 3 years In 2014, the state started to allocate the AIS funds to the counties so that they can have efforts to prevent AIS at the county level. So they've been allocating $10 million each year to all the counties. We receive about $250,000 each year. The primary changes to the plan were to our goals. One of the original goals in the plan was to survey all the accesses, the watercraft accesses in the county, to see if they had any AIS signage or not. And we have done that, and we have put up-to-date signage at all the public accesses in the county. The goal now is more to work with the private resorts and the private accesses. We're also going to be supplying homeowners with clean, drain, dry signs so that they can put them up on their own properties. Another original goal in our plan was to purchase a hot water, high-pressure decontamination unit so we could take it to the public accesses and decontaminate watercraft. We did a lot of research and decided, because of the maintenance issues and liability and transportation and storage, that it would be a lot more feasible to not buy a unit ourselves, but to contract with a vendor for those services. So that's what we are doing now. Originally, we had thought we would do a county-wide lake studies of vegetation to see what invasives are out there now and get a baseline, and also to check for zebra mussels. And we have done some of that in some of the lakes, but it is just too costly to do that as a entire county kind of initiative. So that has been put down to a lower priority. There just isn't enough money to do that. Originally, we had cited a lot of grant opportunities that could be had with the DNR, encouraging the lake associations to also look for grant money elsewhere, not just with the county. And as the counties have gotten more money, or any money, the DNR has cut back their grants so that there's very little that can be had for grant money from the DNR anymore. The primary way that we continue to fund our proposals or fund our initiatives is through proposals from the lake associations. So we continue each year, we put out a request for proposals to all the lake associations and the townships and the cities and the watershed districts, and ask for their proposals on how they would like the money to be spent. And that's how we originally set it up, and that's, I think, how we will continue to do it. Concerning the report for 2017, the major current infestations in the county are starry stonewort in Coronis and Rice Lakes. And then this past year, we also found starry stonewort in Grand Lake. There are zebra mussels in Clearwater Lake, Big Birch, the Mississippi River, Lake Sylvia, Lower Watab, and Watab, which is not the same as Big Watab. They're smaller lakes. And also last year, zebra mussels were found in Knaus Lake, which is part of the Sauk River chain of lakes. So presumably the entire chain will be found to be infested eventually. There's Eurasian water milfoil in Clearwater Lake, the lower and middle Spunk Lakes, Sylvia, Little Birch, and Big Sauk Lake. So, there are a number of infestations. Last year there were 2 new ones that we found, Grand and Knaus. So last year, in 2017, we spent $270,000. The categories that the expenses were in were administration. That's 6%. That's to reimburse mostly for my time. Most of the money is spent through the request for proposals. We got 29 requests submitted, mostly from lake associations. We spent 4% of the funds on education and awareness. So that would be $9,837. The Sauk River Watershed District created AIS kits for all the elementary and high schools, and they presented AIS information at a lot of the schools. The AIS committee members visited 26 resorts in the county, and they held a workshop for the resort owners. We paid out some incentives to people who were selling water-related equipment. And there is a state law that if you are taking equipment like a dock or a raft out of your lake and moving it to another lake, it is supposed to stay out of the water for 21 days. The idea being that during that time any invasive will have died. And there's evidence that that probably isn't long enough. And most people don't seem to know about this rule. So we've started an incentive and offering it to people. If they keep their equipment out of the water for 31 days, we will give them $200 as an incentive to go beyond what the law requires. Also, through an effort between the Soil and Water Conservation District and our office and the Stearns Coalition of Lake Association, there was a grant from the state, the Clean Water Fund, and we put together that shoreland booklet that I think you have a copy of.
I handed it out to you earlier.
Yeah, the Shoreland Homeowner's Guide. So our office is sending that out to all the new owners of shoreland in the county for 2 years. And also the Stearns Coalition of Lake Associations is working with the lake associations to get copies out to their members. And we've taken an original document from Becker County, but then we modified it so that it reflects all the Stearns County ordinances. And it also has information on a lot of natural resource concerns like revegetation on your shoreland and proper refuse disposal. And then we also put in aquatic invasive species information in there. Also, this isn't to do with AIS, but the countywide newsletter is going to have 2 pages of a DNR fact sheet on healthy shorelines. I was asked to tell you that. Another area that we spend money on is inspection and decontamination, and that's the biggest expense. 73% of the budget last year was spent for watercraft inspection and decontamination. So that's $196,000. We did the decontamination services cost $43,000. We did 44 hot water, high pressure decontaminations. Our goal would be to increase that number. We're trying to think of different ways to give incentives to people to have their watercraft decontaminated. We paid out $135,000 towards the watercraft inspections. And then the lake associations also contribute money. They contributed an additional $38,000. So between the local AIS fund and the lake association contributions, we paid for a little over 11,000 hours of inspections. There were a total of 21,000 inspections done in the county last year. The inspectors stopped or found on incoming boats aquatic plants 115 times, and those aren't all necessarily invasives, but it's against the law to carry any kind of aquatic vegetation. They found mud 7 times, water 21 times, and water can be a vector for zebra mussels or spiny water flea. And they did find spiny water flea 2 times and zebra mussels 2 times. So altogether they found 147 incoming watercraft that were potentially carrying invasive species. And that's a pretty low percentage. It's only about 1%, but you know, as we all know, it only takes 1. So 0 is what we should be aiming for. We spent some money on population assessment and management, where we did surveys of invasive species and then paid some money to try to manage them either chemically or through harvesting. Most of those funds were spent for either Eurasian water milfoil or starry stonewort. And that was $43,000. So those are the main categories of expenditure. I mean, as far as enforcement goes, there were 4 instances where the watercraft inspectors felt the need to call in either a conservation officer or a sheriff patrol person to back up the enforcement. Usually the causes were people who insisted on leaving with a drain plug in. You're supposed to always pull it before you get out on the road. Or they refused inspection. The boater is gone before the officer gets there, so we don't know what kind of follow-up there is or if there's ever has been any kind of result from that. As far as the AIS committee, we have 12 people who are coming from lake associations, the Soil and Water Conservation District, and the Watershed District. We meet approximately monthly, and the committee meetings have been a really good opportunity for lake people to get together and both learn about natural resource issues and also to connect with the Soil and Water Conservation District. So there have been some good initiatives that have come from that relationship. Another good effect of the AIS committee meetings is that the Stearns County Coalition of Lake Associations has grown and strengthened, and I think some of the lake associations have gotten to be stronger also. So that's all I had.
Okay, thank you, Sue. Kevin?
Kevin Farnham, and I act as the chair for the AIS committee. Just to let you know, this is a program that really you should be proud of. Sue and I get a chance to go to regional meetings that bring in the counties from around the state. And we have one of the, just from observation, we have one of the more aggressive ways of getting all the funds out. The funds are to be out there. This $10 million was to get out and to the kind of the grassroots and do good works. And I think we do. We get a chance to see the other programs, and we're very disciplined, and Commissioner Merrick is well aware of how disciplined we can be about getting the funds out in the right hands on good projects and trying to do things. What you heard from Sue is that many of the things, most of the funds are spent on the preventive activities. Even though it sounded at the beginning that we've failed, we're still going down doing the work of prevention. It depends on how you want to spin that story. 0 is the right answer, as Sue said. So thank you for all of your support And thank you to Shelley for giving us Sue. We just love working with Sue. She's so dedicated to this cause. So we're very pleased. I can speak representing Stearns Coalition of Lake Associations and Lake Coronas as well. We're very pleased with the direction we're going, and hopefully you are too when you get opportunities to talk about what's happening in Stearns County. I think we're doing very well. So thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Commissioner Merrick.
Yeah, on behalf of the board and myself, I'd like to thank Kevin and Sue for for the work that they do. Sue brings just a wealth of information and is well prepared all the time, and Kevin does a good job in leading the committee and in reviewing all the applications. So thank you sincerely, and thanks to the entire committee. You mentioned, if I understood you correctly, that they're on, and I like to hear when somebody's working on prevention rather than the cure. That's where we should be focusing in all of our government activities. But I think I heard you say that there were 115 that were found to have violated, but there's no follow-up. Is there, and I don't know, I see the sheriff in the back of the room, but is there a way that you can find out whether or not there has been some follow-up? We don't need to know the details, but if there's somebody that's violating, if it's the same people all the time, is there some way to follow up on that, or is that nothing we can do about?
I mean, that larger number, 115, would have been people who showed up with, like, usually vegetation on the boat.
Okay.
And the inspector's instructed activity is to talk to the boater and make sure everything is cleaned off. So the boat is clean before it goes into the water.
Yeah.
I mean, there were some cases where people either refused inspection or insisted on leaving with their drain plug in the boat. I think there were 4 of those cases.
And I guess my question is, if there's a follow-up of some type, those individuals that refuse inspection, or those individuals that have brought some plants in of some type, so it's not the same people that are having the same offense all the time, or is there nothing? It's just
Mr. Chair and Commissioner Merrick, one of the situations was a couple out on a lake that 2 fishermen were going out, and as Sue said, by the time they called the DNR conservation officer over, they had already launched. I mean, you have one inspector out there who does have authority to refuse inspection and has told them you may not enter into the lake, and they just ignore it, and they went out onto the lake anyhow. In that particular case, the conservation officer came in, and the only reason I know this is that I was able to follow up with him later, the individual, and ask him, well, what did you do? And what he had done is he went out and he wrote him a ticket for everything he could think of, other than the refusing inspection. And I think the strategy that would go, speaking as an old regulatory person myself, you have to be very, very careful if you open up a lawsuit or a ticket against someone for that particular violation, because you open up the law and all of a sudden you run the risk of losing that in the law. And so in his case, we did know what the follow-up is.
Okay.
But there's not always that direct link back between the conservation officers and into us. It's turned over to them. We have record that it goes to them, which is unfortunate, but that's the mode of operation that we have to deal with. So,
okay, good. Thank you.
thank you. It's a great
Mr.
question.
Notch.
Great.
Can you give a kind of just a scenario? I've seen the inspectors out there, and they usually have an iPad or something. Do they just have like a follow-up, like a list of questions that they go through when they do an inspection?
Yeah, the DNR has a standard set of questions that everybody goes through. They do a survey and they digitally put it in. They ask, like, what's the last lake you were in, and how long has your boat been out of the water? And that's all digitally recorded, and then that information gets sent to DNR. And all that information is available on the DNR website. It's an FTP site, but It's all public information,
So they leave off like your name and
not named,
they don't
right?
take
No names.
plate
yeah.
number down or
The plate
type of
number,
bolt?
yep,
Yeah.
but not, no names, right?
Okay. Thanks.
Joe?
Okay, I was a bit concerned that the zebra mussels were found in Canals Lake. Was that just this past year?
Yes, yep,
Okay. And of course, that means that probably the chain will be affected.
probably so, yes.
Would you anticipate that then going all the way up the Sauk River then as well?
Well, they probably aren't gonna go up.
Okay.
But, I mean, Big Birch has zebra mussels. So it's probably already come down.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sure it will spread throughout.
Okay, and then one other item. Is it possible we could get these brochures to the Planning Commission as well? If we would have those, so. Yeah.
Mr. Chair, just for information, public information too, it is available on our website, so for any of the public watching.
Board members, what are your wishes? We're looking to approve the plan revision as presented.
I'll move approval of the recommended action.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're up to Public Works, item F. And we have Jeff Miller here.
I want to just give this to you. I want to talk to you about Coronas, about Lake Coronas. Absolutely. Okay. Thank you.
Well, good morning.
Morning, Jeff.
Jeff Miller, Assistant County Engineer. My first item today is to request approval to award the bid for lowering 2 culverts for the North Fork Crow River Watershed District. Bids were opened last Thursday, April 19th, and the low bidder was Landwehr Construction Incorporated with a bid of $138,355.20, which was 18% below the engineer's estimate. And we're asking the board to award the contract to Landwehr Construction.
I'll move the recommended action.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
My next item is to
Motion
request
carries.
approval for amendment number 1 to MnDOT contract number 1030581, which is related to our SP 073-675-037, which is our CASA 75 resurfacing project. The amendment is necessary due to a change in the name of the funding from National Highway Performance Program to Surface Transportation Program Flexible. And we're asking the board to approve the amendment and adopt the corresponding resolution authorizing the auditor treasurer to execute the agreement on behalf of the county.
Move approval.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify with aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries.
And I have one miscellaneous item for informational purposes. It's to let you know of an upcoming open house for a CASA 75 corridor study we've been participating in with the city of St. Cloud. That covers the section of CASA 75 or Roosevelt Road between 33rd Street South and CASA 7 in South St. Cloud. The open house will be held on Tuesday, May 1st from 5 to 7 p.m. at the Gateway Business Center, Unit 112. That's located at 3900 Roosevelt Road in St. Cloud. And the purpose of the study is to review existing traffic volumes and future land use changes in South St. Cloud, which will affect the CASA 75 corridor, as well as begin discussions about viable access alternatives and a connecting street network within the area. And that's all I have for today, unless you have any questions for me.
Anybody have any questions? Commissioner Persky?
I just, mentioning that meeting, I'll just, for the sake of the public, mention May 8th, we have a meeting coming up as well, do we not? There's a county road plan. I
County
believe
road
it's
plan is May 8th, yes.
May 8th
At 7 p.m. at the Public Works Building in
so
Wake
if
Park.
folks have concerns about the road plan, they sure should show up and let their opinion be
Yeah,
heard.
absolutely.
Okay.
Commissioner Notch?
Can you give us just a brief update on the County Road 65 bridge?
They
project?
poured the bridge deck yesterday. So they'll have to let that sit for a couple weeks to cure out. After that, they'll look at pouring the railings on the bridge. And then once the frost gets out of the ground, we'll start doing some earthwork behind the bridge, and hopefully we'll have that thing opened up by the end of May.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
Our next item G is parks. We have Ben Anderson here.
Morning, Commissioners.
Good morning.
Anderson, Parks Director. First item on the agenda for Parks today is an easement agreement with the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources for the installation, maintenance, and use of a groundwater observation well at Rockville County Park. With me here today is...
Good morning, gentlemen. Patrick Moen, Assistant Stearns County Attorney. I assisted Mr. Anderson in facilitating this and drafting the documents that would be recorded.
Thank you. In January, the Parks Department was contacted by a Minnesota DNR hydrologist in regards to possibly placing a groundwater observation well at Rockville County Park on the westernmost boundary. The DNR has many of these wells scattered throughout the state, and one such well was located just west of Rockville County Park, but it was on private property. We were informed that this well is failing and that the DNR is trying to move the majority of these observation wells off of private property onto public property. The new well would be 6 inches in diameter, steel casing, and it would extend approximately 3 feet above the land surface. The location of the proposed well is near the middle of the westernmost park boundary at Rockville County Park. If you look on packet page 223, there's a map that shows that location. The well will only be installed if adequate conditions are found, so they will be drilling a test bore to make sure that the conditions are right, and then if the conditions are right, they would install the well. If not, they would abort and restore the area back into prior conditions or better. So the Parks Department staff reviewed the proposed well location, has worked with the county surveyor and attorney's office to draft this easement language, and the Minnesota DNR attorney has agreed to the proposed language in this easement as well. Parks is also planning on installing some sort of informational signage near this location as well if the well in fact is put into place. So I guess what I'm looking for from the county board is to possibly approve the easement with the Minnesota DNR for installing, maintaining, and use of a test hole or water level observation well at Rockville County Park.
I move approval of the recommended action.
I'll second with a question.
Moved and seconded. Commissioner Notch?
So that includes whether they have to use the alternate well location versus?
No, the alternate well location was thrown out of the equation because it's near a snowmobile trail and the hazard.
Okay.
So, okay, let's say the one then doesn't pass inspection. What do you do? What's the plan then? Stay where they're at, or?
Yes, then, yeah, they would look for other options. This easement would become nullified because they only have permission to do it, or would only have permission within that location.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Persky?
Ben, I understand, is the purpose of the well to monitor the aquifer and then the quality of water? Is that?
My understanding is not necessarily the quality of water, it's just the groundwater level itself, the fluctuation over time.
Okay.
Any other questions? It's been moved and seconded. Seeing no further discussion, all in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
And
All right.
item 2.
Yes, item 2. I'm going to invite 2 members from the Great River Archery Center Club to help me present the information. I have with me Don Primley. Don, if you want to introduce yourself.
Don Primley from Sartell.
And Brian Coons.
Brian Coons from Sartell.
So in 2016, as I'm sure most of you are aware, an Eagle Scout built an 11-target outdoor archery range up at Mississippi County Park. From May 2017 Through October 2017, the range averaged 22 vehicles per day. In over 184 days, this would equal about 4,050 vehicles that came in and out of just for the use of the archery range at Mississippi County Park in a 6-month period. So although this archery range has only been operating for 1 year, I think the numbers speak for themselves when it comes to this park amenity being a desired asset for our community and our residents. Last fall, the park department was approached by an up-and-coming citizen group about the possibility of building an indoor archery facility near the outdoor range at Mississippi County Park. The citizen group is now known as the THE Great River Archery Center/Club. The idea was pitched in a way that the club would build a building and donate the building to the county for an indoor archery range. The club would maintain the building and facilitate archery activities, and the county would provide the property and maintain the grounds. Parks dug into the possibility of such partnership to see if there's others that are doing some similar activities, and found that Anoka County has a similar setup at their Bunker Hills Regional Park, where the archery facility is run by a club and the county owns the building and the property around the facility. When talking with the Anoka County official who manages this agreement, he spoke very, very highly of the partnership. The idea for this indoor archery range up at Mississippi County Park was brought forth to the County Park Commission on March 14th, and they voted to support forming this partnership. So I guess with that brief introduction, I would like to invite both Don and Brian to comment on their vision for the proposed partnership and the facility as well.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Over the last 23 years, we have shot archery at Mike's Archery. That building has sold, and so there's no longer a building in St. Cloud, greater St. Cloud area, except for Archery Country, that only has a limited amount of shooting space. Over those 23 years, there's been 800 to 1,000 kids instructed, kids and adults, families instructed the art of archery. We've had many dozens of state championships of all ages, 3 international and national champions, and 1 bronze medalist in a Paralympics from the greater St. Cloud area. We no longer have an area to shoot indoors and to promote the sport of archery. The club, now known as the Great River Archery Center, proposes that we build a building so we continue the family sport and to encourage amateur competition, but at the same time teaching hunting safety, teaching amateur competition, including the Junior Olympic Archery Development Program and the National Archery in Schools Program, as long as supporting the Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, and the 4-H in their endeavors. They allow them to shoot for their merit badges of archery. So there's been 3 Eagle Scout projects out there at the park associated with the archery club or the county property. There's another one that's slated to start in May with the approval of the Parks Department, and then another Scout is up and coming to do another Eagle Scout project real close to that, again associated with an outdoor range. The public can use the outdoor ranges continuously when the park is open. The indoor archery facility will be open to the public on specific nights and will be maintained and supervised by the members of the club. We have applied for a 501c3 with a law firm in St. Louis Park. We've also applied for an LLC. Those articles of incorporation have been presented to the state of Minnesota. And the agreement would be that we would maintain the indoor, build the building, maintain the indoors, provide the liability and accidental insurance for inside the building, where the park would maintain the outside. We've also would incorporate into the outside an access to a bathroom, a unisex bathroom, so we could get rid of the two outhouses that are out there now. So that bathroom would be maintained by the park's maintenance department and the members as we go through and clean it. We would have indoor bathrooms as well, but they would not be accessible unless you were inside the building. The members would have access to the building with a key fob that would record their entrance and leaving, and with the security system we would know who would be in there. There'd be set hours according to the park, their hours of operation. And one of the goals right now, that park does not qualify for Heritage Legacy funds because it's not a regionally significant park. Well, I've already been in touch with the Minnesota State Archery Association, and if we hold state tournaments, which the park is set up perfectly for, an outdoor 900 because it has an opening that faces north 80 yards wide and over 100 yards long, surrounded by trees, which would be perfect for an outdoor tournament, the state outdoor tournament, and the FIDA tournament, which is more geared toward Olympics style shooting. Plus it has a wide area to the south and to the east for the 3D state archery tournament as well. Bringing folks from around the state to shoot at those state tournaments would make it more regionally significant. The participants in state tournaments now complain a lot about having to drive to Grand Rapids or to Thief River Falls or to Owatonna or to Redwood Falls, where St. Cloud area would benefit because they have the capability of providing multiple hotels, motels, restaurants, gas stations, so it would bring people more centrally located. And that's been the complaint in the past. Why can't we have a place that we can shoot tournaments centrally, so we don't have to travel to the far ends of the state? So with those tournaments and possibility of international as well, because of clubs in Thunder Bay and Winnipeg come down and shoot, that would make that area more regionally significant, and therefore the park hopefully would qualify for Heritage Legacy Fund.
Thank you.
Brian, do you have something that you'd like to say as well? Or?
No, just in our, excuse me, I work at Shields, and we've done studies just on the market of where the archery is going to be in the past and where it's going in the future, and there is a good need and an increase of interest in target archery, and not just hunting, but in competition levels, and we are seeing an interest in that as a growth area.
Board? Commissioner Merrick.
Yeah, from what I hear your presentation, there's a need and there's a desire. Looks like it's all good. I have a question on the comments section, the last sentence in our board packets. It says more formal documentation in regards to each party's responsibilities and expectations will be developed when and if the formation of the partnership is approved. So is this a two-part, when we have to approve the partnership, and then there's going to be another document that comes after that we have to act on?
Mr. Chair and Commissioner, that is how we've presented this, is so that the board can really give its sort of preliminary approval, because there's some fundraising and a lot of work and some expense that would need to occur before this becomes a reality. But there would be a more formal lease agreement and agreements drafted before we actually finalize the project.
And that would come back to the board?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to move approval of the recommended action.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Sounded to me like all the expenses going to be through the archery club, right?
Mr. Chairman, that's correct. We will not compete with any retail facility in the. We're not going to sell anything except family entertainment and time on a bail shooting and instruction. We want that legacy to continue, and right now our plan is to apply for every grant and source of funding, including private donations, to put this building together. And to apply for some of those grants, this facility has to be on government property. We cannot own it. We cannot make a profit from it. And that's really strictly laid out in our bylaws, that there is no compensation whatsoever to the Archery Center or to their board of directors.
Mr. Persky.
Yeah, just a couple of comments. And I think it's a very exciting project. I'm looking forward to it becoming a reality. Just a great plus. And just in our conversation earlier, we were drawing it similar to the agreement, maybe for perhaps like the band shell down at Lake George, where the Rotary came up with that project, put it there, and put it on public property. So then, you have the use by the public as well as the Rotary being able to use it for their things as well. So. Again, just a great opportunity. One thing that wasn't mentioned is the other potential for the indoor space to provide the shelter. So, we got Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts up there that are maybe doing a day camp. It's up there also. Should they run into bad weather and have to go indoors, they've got protection up there as well. So it provides some flexibility for some space as well for other activities. So,
Mr. Merrick.
Is this something, if it's approved here, and I'm sure the board's going to support this, is there like a timetable out there, like in the next couple of months, the next couple of years, where this would come to fruition?
Mr. Chairman and Commissioner Merrick, I'd like it to happen yesterday, but that's not feasible. We are going to move as swiftly as we can with the approvals. Our timetable is 2/19 right now.
Okay.
We're probably late for applying for some of the money now, but we'll lay that groundwork,
okay,
plus get private donations. And we've already had donations in kind from people that would do the dirt work, the air or the heating and air conditioning, that will do it for cost.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And so we'd like to just move along as quickly as we could.
Okay.
And again, with the multi-use, we're not asking anything else that's in that park to stop whatever they're doing. The boat launch, the frisbee golf. We've talked to the park that they can run a ski trail right up there, and the cross-country ski clubs in the winter could actually hold a citizens race or a citizens event and use that as a staging area for their.
Okay, thank you.
Good, thank you.
Anything else from the board? Otherwise, I think we're ready to vote. All in favor, signify with aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for all that work.
Sorry.
Appreciate all that work.
We are going to take a 5-minute break before we go to the Sheriff's Department. We're back. And we have item H here, which is the Sheriff's Department. Sheriff Gudmundsson, Bob Dickhouse, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members. Stearns County Sheriff Don Gudmundsson. And occasionally when we use our drone or the unmanned aerial vehicle, right, UAV, we'll put it in the newsletter, actually written by Kelly, who's here, and John Lentz. And we'll put it in the newsletter. It gets a lot of interest internally from county staff who see our newsletter. The newsletter obviously is the front row, but it also gets interest from the media and interest from our citizens who will contact us and say, well, I really enjoyed that story on the drone. A couple of weeks back, we had a horrible accident near Cold Spring, and the State Patrol asked us to pop up, I guess that's a good word, to pop up our drone, take pictures of it. And so I looked at it and I thought perhaps the board would be interested in the best of drones. And I talked to Dr. Williams and asked whether he thought you would be, and he thought you would. And so I have Lieutenant Bob Dickhouse here with me today. Bob runs the program and obviously supervises the deputies, but he's also a licensed pilot. So, and as part of this, that's important. And so I'll turn it over to Bob.
Thank you, Sheriff Gudmundsson. Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board.
Morning.
Bob Dickhouse, Stearns County Sheriff's Office, Patrol Lieutenant and in charge of the UAV program or drone operation program. Like the Sheriff said, I appreciate the opportunity to come present here today. We oftentimes get a lot of questions about the use of the drone and some of the activities that we have with it. So it's really nice to come back here today and give you an update on some of the things we've done over the past year since we purchased it in 2017. So what we'll do here is I just kind of run through some basic information, and then we prepared a short 1-hour video.
Thank you.
Just 10 minutes.
You got everybody's attention there.
Yeah, just 10 minutes.
Do we have a link for that?
Just making sure you're with me. So you caught me. So, we'll go through that. But, back in March of 2017, the Sheriff's Office purchased its first DJI Inspire 1 drone. A lot of times people like to call them unmanned aerial aircrafts or UAVs. Military terminology is drone, but it's interchangeable. So we purchased this for the purpose of assisting in the search for missing persons and items during official police operations. The UAV is equipped with 2 cameras. One is a standard non-zoom camera that we use normally for daylight operations and flights. And the other one is what's called a Zenmoose XT thermal camera with FLIR technology. That technology literally allows officers to see into the darkness or see through the darkness during night flight. So that's the extremely helpful part of the tool, or helpful tool part of the UAV. Both cameras are mounted upon a gimbal, which allows the camera to remain steady. And even though there may be high wind conditions or bumpy flights and abrupt stops and turns, the camera remains very steady, allowing for a very, say pleasurable, but an easy way to view the video. So, and you'll see that, and I'll point out a couple of cues to see to demonstrate that. So, officers have flown the UAV for literally hundreds of hours in the past year. We're only bound by bad weather and temperature. We can fly down to about 20 degrees, but if it was an emergency, we could actually fly into colder temperatures, although the iPads tend to start to blink and flash, and they don't work very well. So the UAV can fly in pretty low temperatures, but some other things they restrict us from doing that. We currently have eight deputies who are fully trained to operate the UAV. 5 of those deputies are certified by the FAA to operate and hold an actual FAA certificate. We hope to have the remaining 3 trained, hopefully, or not trained, tested by the end of the week here, and then they'll be certified as well. That certification is not required for UAV operations. We actually operate under what's called a COA, or a Certificate of Authorization, which we obtain through the FAA. So we're covered either way. What the certificate does is really allows the officers, or enables the officers, to become better trained, receive more training, almost similar to the training I received as a private pilot. So they get more training on weather, areas that they can fly, cannot fly, and what the rules or FAA restrictions are. So it's really it's a good thing for them. It's a good thing for the county. So since the officers began flying the UAV, we have had no incidents or damage to the unit, and we've had no complaints about its use as well. So they're flying it very professionally, and things have been going well in that respect. Officers routinely have the UAV with them during their patrol flights. They carry it right in the large case. It's all ready to go, packed in there very tightly, so it can withstand bumpy roads and maybe some pursuit type driving. So it's always, like I say, unless the weather's bad, we usually have it out there 24 hours a day if possible, if there's an operator available. So that cuts down on operator response times, so the UAV can be up and in the air in hopefully just a matter of minutes. So in 2018, we purchased a second UAV, which is a somewhat less expensive unit, which requires the same skills and utilize the same flight controls as the original UAV we purchased. So they're both DJI products. They require exactly the same controller, but we can, if we were to lose the practice UAV, it would be far less expensive than losing our larger white one you see there. So I own one that's similar to that gray one as well. I've managed not to crash it for an entire year and a half, so I have all the faith and confidence in our staff that they won't as well. So as you will see in the video that we've prepared, the UAV is really an invaluable tool to law enforcement today. It's not the only thing in the world, but it's something that's being used widely across the country and the state. You'll see much of the video you see on TV may look like helicopter video, but it's probably very likely UAV video taken by either law enforcement or a news agency. It's a far less expensive option than bringing in a helicopter, and the time to deploy it is far less. The Sheriff's Office hopes to continue to build upon the UAV team and its technology, and we've already begun to share our abilities and technology with other departments. We recently assisted the Stearns County Surveyor's Office with flying, I believe it was ditch number 6, did a documentation flight. It'll be before flight. I think it's scheduled to be excavated or dug out this spring sometime, and then we'll do a second flight after the kind of clean out is done, and just to document the impact or the work that the excavator has done. So really excited about that. We're actually doing another flight on Thursday, weather allowing, and we'll continue to do that hopefully through the summer or spring here as needed. Dean Trummel's been very good to work with, and we hope to provide him with the necessary video that he needs to do his job. So with the assistance of IS, we were able to put together like I said, a short video for your viewing, and I'll narrate it a little bit. There's about 9 clips in here of actual cases that we worked on. A few of them are FLIR images, and the other ones are just regular camera video. So the UAV can take video and still photos. So oftentimes it'll be flying. If there's something of interest, say with one of our ditches, we can say whoever's operating the second iPad can say, hey, stop, take a photo of that, take another photo, and it can be right during the video and then just continue on. So is able to take photos and video of scenes and things of interest. So really a neat tool for a lot of the things we do and a lot of things that the county will do. So without holding up the show anymore here, let's see if I can't get it going. First one is a video of a assist agency. We assisted the State Patrol. One of our deputies happened to be doing a jail transport or going to pick up a inmate in another county, overheard some radio traffic of the State Patrol having a individual who ran from a traffic stop. We happened to be close by. We were able to respond to the area, put the UAV up, and quickly found the suspect hiding in a bean field. And by the way, this is at probably 2 o'clock in the morning. So very difficult to find this individual. Had we had to go out on foot, it would have taken numerous officers to cover that large field. We were able to spot him very quickly through the heat detection, and we're kind of skipping through it here, but that documented his arrest and walking him back to the patrol car. He got a little aggressive there towards the end, ended up having to be resecured. But that's a nice way to document that. Resecured, yes. So that's a nice way to document that. It protects the officers and the entities as well. So it's.
He was in a stolen vehicle.
Yes, I believe he was a stolen vehicle. That's why he ran for the hills. Here's another FLIR clip. We assisted the Cold Spring Police Department. An individual had assaulted his wife, I believe it was, or girlfriend. Officers responded. He fled from the vehicle, hid out in bushy area north or west of Cold Spring. This runs a little longer, but again, officers were able to quickly find the suspect hiding in the brush. They were able to approach safely with real-time information from the drone operator, leading them right to the suspect, and were able to take him into custody virtually without incident. I think he felt quite defeated, knowing that, wondering how the officers had any idea where he was, and they walked right up to him and took him into custody. An interesting piece about, or a note on this one, is as the individuals walked away here in a moment, you'll see the heat signature that he leaves on the ground. So had he, moved from area to area, we'd still have a fairly good idea of where he had been, or this individual had been. So again, the ability to document the arrest and subsequent walkout is kind of really a neat tool. This was a search warrant conducted by our VOTIF. Again, this is, I should say again, but this is a trailer park in Stearns County. What we did is you'll see the vehicles approaching from the west here. They're going to deploy from the vehicle and make entry on this trailer. Really neat part about this is, this can document if something were to go bad at this point. It's information we can provide back to the officers or the team leader. If a vehicle suddenly leaves or somebody flees from the area, they can make a new plan very quickly without having to walk into like an unknown situation. You notice on this video the trees, how hard they're blowing. There's about 30-mile-an-hour winds. That camera is completely still. That gimbal is what keeps that thing from flying away with the wind. So this was an incident over head-on collision near Roscoe recently. We just did a short. There's actually we did about 3 videos and around 100 pictures of this crash scene. Just giving you some highlights of it, but literally flying the drone through the crash site, giving, say this goes in front of a jury in the court, that would provide just an incredible perspective for a juror to see without just a still photo. So, and we actually did this one in a 3D module too. We weren't able to incorporate that in the video, but we're able to photograph the scene, videotape it, load that into a application, and it was produced a 3D image. So really neat. I could share that with you if you ever stop by. This was a recovery of a stolen gator, piece of farm equipment out in Sauk Center. We knew it was in the field. We put the drone up. Within just a matter of minutes, we were able to find it. And we had a pretty big idea where it was, but that it was neat the way we could kind of spot it out in the field. Just another one of the uses for it. We can, I think the next one is documenting some damage to property. Vehicle had fled from a party, I believe it was, and then tore off through a few fields and end up getting stuck out in a swamp or a marshy area. I think the party was there. We were seeing the bulk of the tracks, but then up to the north or the top left there, you'll see I believe is the tracks of the suspect taking off. Officers were able to eventually apprehend the individual, so we were able to document the damage to the crops and the other area for the later prosecution. Sheriff Goodmanson asked that I not put the music on. That may be too dramatic for you. If it was actual sound, you'd just hear the whizzing of the rotors. So it just zzz, you don't need to hear that part. But we can't overlay music. I don't think that's necessary. So that just shows the final resting spot of the vehicle. Plane crash out of western Stearns County. Was kind of not really remote, but it was in an area that was a little bit difficult to to find initially and then to access. The FAA obviously assisted with this investigation. We were able to provide them with the same footage, and they were very appreciative. Allowed them to get give some perspective too as to where the plane ended up crashing. Corey Park flyover. It's just a short video showing giving you kind of an idea of what it's capable of. This is something we could use for, if it was a promotional type video, if need be. Otherwise, a missing person, maybe documenting how big crowds are, parking issues if we have a large, like we have in the last few summers, lots and lots of cars out there, and they begin parking in the grassy areas and things like that. So we could use it for those types of things. Just a little perspective of that. One part of this you'll see here in a moment. The UAV is actually designed to be flown by two people. It's flown by one person, but you'll see on my case over there's an iPad on the control box, and there's actually two of those. One is for flying, and the other one is for the camera. So one person can really focus on, where the UAV is going, and the other person can focus on searching and or documenting. Tornado last fall in Melrose, just showing some overviews of some of the storm damage there. Really amazing. The night before was a loud thunderstorm and tornado damaging buildings, and the next day it's just beautiful sunny weather. It's just kind of amazing. Things like this is the Weather Service likes to see. If you notice on the building to the top, you didn't see it quickly, but it actually scraped the rocks right off the roof of the building, which normally you wouldn't have seen. This building was completely destroyed, was brand new, hadn't even been moved into yet. Rolled it all out into the field, actually over the interstate and down into the ramp area. So the UAV actually could, if we were to do a direct line of flight, we have to keep it within sight, but we could link the videos together and do a complete path of destruction if we needed to do so. This is the golf course in Melrose. I'm just showing again some tree damage and storm path. Doesn't look bad, but it took me about 4 days to clean up, or we to clean up. Still, it looks pretty barren out there if you've been through Melrose lately. And here's a video of one of the ditch flights we did, or the first one we did. Just gives you an idea of the clarity, and it gives you a perspective as to how the ditch is laid out. We'll see this again once it's completed. The clean out is completed, and we'll be able to provide that to, if the landowner has questions or issues, or if, Dean Trummel just likes to show what he has done with the ditch so that you guys have a better idea of how that works out. I believe that's actually like a man-made holding area or pond area. There's a riprap apron that was placed in there. I believe that he wanted that documented specifically. So in the next flight, this is the last video, but when we fly again this week, we have the UAV has the capability to fly what's called a waypoint flight, or waypoint pattern. So we can pull up a map, put different points of interest on the map, and the UAV will actually fly the pattern that we set it to fly. So if say it was a ditch that wasn't completely straight, had some curves in it, we could tell the UAV to fly right down the center of it, make a turn, make another turn, and then continue its flight automatically. We wouldn't have to actually be there. We need to keep the UAV in sight based on FAA flight rules, but that doesn't mean we have to be 100 feet away from it. We can be a quarter mile away from it. So some of these ditches, I understand, are 6 miles long. So obviously we wouldn't make that all in one flight, but we hope to be able to help them guys out. So that's what I have for you today. If you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them. Don wanted me to fly it in here, but I said it might be dangerous. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions, Commissioner Merrick?
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. Simply amazing, an amazing tool that you have at your disposal. And I don't know how long these have been in existence, but not for very long. I mean, so, you know, who knows what the future holds, but simply amazing. So the part that struck me, and I had a conversation with the sheriff earlier about, you know, how you can see in the dark, which I was not aware of. So the question that I have is if you can see into water as well, or is that?
It would not see into the water. It may see if there was a heat contrast. It might be able to see that. You know, say if we were searching for a body or something of that nature. I would think that item or that body would probably change temperature pretty quickly, but it's possible. I mean, it's just looking for the heat to change is all it's really looking for.
So if you can find that heat, then it would maybe help in recovering a body.
Absolutely, yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I just had a couple of questions. First of all, as far as locating lost individuals, and especially at night, what type of range do you have? Do you have to be relatively close to a road, or can you send it out into the woods or into the field from the location of the person operating?
It actually has a documented range of 3 miles line of sight. So if you can see it, obviously I can't see 3 miles, and we generally wouldn't fly it that far away. Yeah. But it will actually fly, basically 3 miles. As long as it can see the controller, like a line of sight, it'll continue to operate. The nice part about both of those UAVs is they'll actually, if they lose contact with the controller, they fly home. Oh. It's an automatic fly home feature. So if the battery gets too low, it warns you on the iPad, hey, time to come home. And if you don't respond, it just comes home.
Yeah. We're trying to get that for most teenagers in the country.
I was thinking about a lost hunter, for example, being able to find it. And then also it works. The infrared works on heat. So when we were looking at those roads, the roads were actually lit, but that was just heat coming off that asphalt from the day.
Yep. Right.
Yeah.
If you notice the front of the patrol car
around the engine
glowing,
compartment.
So it's looking for that heat contrast is all really it's seeing. So you see roads and cool fields, or if there's water, it'll notice that difference.
And a small plane crash, you would still see the heat from the engine, perhaps. Yeah,
sure.
Yeah, and then what about complaints as far as the use of private drones? Have we had many complaints or anything going on there?
Very few, unless the chief deputy knows of any. I haven't had to work on any complaints in the past year. We had some very early when the Phantoms, they call them Phantoms, the smaller units. It's like a publicly available UAV. A little bit with those, but I haven't heard of any recently at all. I mean, I can't account for the city of St. Cloud, but on the county.
Mr. Chair, so when they do the ditches, if they had a private person do it, they usually charge $1,300-1,400, I think, if I'm right. And so we'll do that, and so eventually, if you think about it, it does pay for itself over a period of time.
Right, and anytime the officers have to fly it rather than just flying in circles, that's a good thing. They can use the technology available, and it's good practice time for them, and it's good for you guys too, or for us.
Commissioner Merrick.
I'm not sure if I missed it, but what is the cost of these devices?
The smaller one we just purchased was $1,500. The larger one, the base unit, is about $3,000. Okay. We spent that FLIR camera was significantly more expensive. It was around $9,000.
Okay, so the drone is one part of it, and the camera is another part.
Correct. With the smaller unit, it's kind of a one unit thing. Okay. It's about $1,500. Okay. But the bigger one, you can build on that. You can add different cameras. Okay. The FLIR camera was an add-on.
Okay.
But that's really was the technology we were looking for.
Good. Thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you. Thank you, Sheriff.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just one more thing. We thought maybe in the early fall when the weather is still nice, maybe at an end of a board meeting, we could pop it up out here and you can come out and take a look at it. Okay. And we can coordinate with Dr. Williams.
We want to fly it.
We would like to fly it. Yeah, we want to.
We need
absolutely. We don't want to watch.
Absolutely.
We can be active participants.
A large open area.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
At this time, we're going to recess the regular county board meeting and conduct the Human Services board meeting. And we have Melissa Huberty here.
right. Good morning, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. My name is
Morning.
Melissa Huberty, and I am the Human Services Administrator. And we only have one consent item on the agenda today, which is on page 240, and it's I-1, and wondering if you have any questions about that.
I'll move approval.
Second.
Moved and seconded.
And
Any discussion?
The consent item, just for the general public, is with Fred Holthaus, and I think Commissioner Mergen recommended him,
Yes,
and he was
District
at the
3
last,
citizen
he was at the last
representative.
CCAB meeting, and very impressed with the individual.
Anything further? Seeing nothing, all in favor, signify with aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. We've got one regular board item.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioners, we are here today to talk about our child welfare services. And our child welfare services include child maltreatment assessments and case management and out-of-home placements, adoption, guardianship. And what we'd like to do is we'd like to talk about what we've been doing in Stearns County since the Governor's Task Force on Child Protection in 2015, and even more importantly, what we're planning on doing going forward. And want to make a point about that compliance with these measures is a very complex set of policies and procedures that we must follow. And today I have with me Brenda Mahoney, who is the Division Director of Children and Family Services, along with Angie DeGroat and Sandra Cruz and Jonathan Matson, workers who work in that area. With that, Brenda Mahoney.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning. Mr. Chair, Commissioners, I'm very excited today to have the three social workers that Melissa introduced to be here to talk to you a little bit about what they do and the work that they do on a daily basis. I'll do more of the overview, talking about what are the children's services, the impact of some of the changes, and then some of the steps that we're taking since those changes in 2015 went into place. As Melissa stated, child welfare services cover a wide range of services, from the initial receipt of child maltreatment reports all the way through, in some cases, to adoption, as well as voluntary prevention services such as the Parent Support Outreach Program and court-ordered and involved services. Most of the services are mandated. In fact, all the services we provide are mandated through many different statutes, both at the Minnesota level and at the federal level. Two of the main ones are the Child Maltreatment Act under Minnesota Statute 626.556 and the Federal Child Abuse Prevention and Treatment Act, also known as CAPTA. There have been some significant changes in the extent of services provided and how they're provided since the establishment of the Governor's Task Force on Child Protection that occurred in 2014 and resulted in 93 recommendations that were made in 2015. At the time that those recommendations were made, there was not a huge voice of county social services at the table in the development of those recommendations, and we've been working with the state on how to proceed with implementing many of those recommendations. Many of those recommendations expanded what's considered abuse and neglect and what requires a maltreatment response. With this, there is an increase in child protection funding from the state to increase the child protection workforce statewide. However, 20% of that was withheld annually and tied to meeting specific performance measures, and I'll get to mention that a little bit more about that in a few minutes. Some of the results that we've had since the changes in 2015, as you can see here, have been a lot of increases. There's been increases in reports, in assessments, and in services. We've moved more to a more prescriptive system with increased resources linked to child maltreatment assessments and less time directed to early intervention and prevention services, and using some solution-focused interventions that we found in the past have been a best practice and helpful for our families. We've also had a result of an increase in staff turnover and some difficulties with staff retention as a result of the higher caseloads and services we've experienced. At this point, I'd like to turn it over to John Matson, who is one of the social workers who completes child maltreatment assessments. He also does some intake and works on screening those reports. And he's going to describe a little bit about the services that he provides.
Thank you, Brenda. Mr. Chair, Commissioners, my name is John Matson, as Brenda said. I am a assessment and investigation social worker based out of the Melrose office. I've been employed by Human Services since November of 2014. A majority of that time has been doing investigations and assessments. As previously stated, there are many functions of a child protection social worker. As Brenda said, my main function is responding to reports of abuse or neglect. I also work on intake and screening and also play a part in our out-of-home placements. When responding to reports of neglect or abuse, oftentimes that needs coordination with other community agencies, whether it be law enforcement, child advocacy center, mental health, or chemical dependency services, to say just a few. I need to coordinate with law enforcement in matters that could result in criminal charges. The Child Advocacy Center to make sure that our statements are taken in a consistent and an evidence-based practice that's widely accepted. I need to coordinate with chemical dependency and/or mental health providers to gather a complete picture of parents' needs and their supports to assess their children's safety in the home. Also, there's timelines that go along with assessing a child's safety. There are timelines as to how long I have to make contact with the victim and the family. There are timelines to when a petition needs to be drafted and filed with the courts when a child has been removed from their parents' care and placed into foster care. Lastly, there are timelines that are set to when an assessment or an investigation has to be completed. As mentioned before, caseloads have been on the rise in the time that I've been employed by Stearns County. Myself alone, I completed 64 assessments or investigations in 2017. I'm not the leader of the pack. Some of my coworkers are in the 70s and 80s. So take into consideration the coordination that we have to do in working a case and also the timelines that need to be followed. It can be a daunting task, but it is a task that myself and many of my coworkers enjoy and have a passion for. Now that I've provided a very brief description of my function, I'll focus on the immeasurable side of our job. The increase in caseload and reports not only has an effect on Stearns County Human Services, it also has an effect on our agencies and families within the community. An increase in reports often means that there's an increase in law enforcement involvement, an increase in the number of children placed in privately licensed foster care, number of families using supervised visitation services, also families utilizing chemical dependency, mental health and/or parenting education resources. Stearns County Human Services can have a direct effect on these providers as well and the families that we serve. As Brenda said, staff turnover is an area that we see an issue with. It can lead to a decrease in continuity for the family, can have a negative effect on the collaboration and case planning that we do with our agency providers, and also may lead to negative consequences for families. This is not our goal. It's never been a goal of any social service agency and continues to be something that needs to be addressed. As stated before, many of my counterparts have a passion and really enjoy what we do, but they're all asking for the same thing: resources, supports, and of course, an increase in staff. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, John. We wanted to provide a little bit of data to you to follow up on what John was saying is about the increases. This slide shows the increase in child maltreatment reports and assessments in the past 10 years. Until the last year, you'll notice the blue line, the high line, it shows the number of reports that are received. And that was pretty stable. Last year we took a huge jump, and this year we believe that we will surpass that as well. So that's been kind of a slow increase. The orange line is the number of actual reports that are screened in. That has increased significantly. In fact, there's been a 220% increase in reports that have been screened in the last 10 years. With that, with the changes in statute, there's also been a change in the type of reports that qualify to have, by criteria, meet the need for having an assessment. We used to screen in approximately 26 to 28% of reports received for child maltreatment assessment. That has gone up to well over 40%, and this year it's actually almost at 50% of the reports that we receive. So that line is going much higher than the change in the reports received. As the number of assessments has increased and the statutes have changed around child protection, one of the results has been an increase in out-of-home placements. You can see by looking at this chart, there's kind of a dip in there. That was back in about 2009 through 2012-13, when we really had an opportunity to do some different practices. We used some solution-focused, evidence-based practices, primarily using the signs of safety model. And there are some strategies that really helped us intervene earlier and to try to maintain children within their home. As the numbers have grown, the ability to engage families in early intervention services has decreased, and we've continued to see an increase in the number of out-of-home placements. One of our concerns with that is that and it's not shown on here though, is that in Stearns County, about 9% of our children are identified as being children of color. In our out-of-home placement system, that number is 38%. That's a disparity that we really need to address and that we're concerned on, and some of the changes that we've seen in statute, we believe, has impacted that. As child maltreatment assessments have grown, so have the number of families that are determined to need ongoing child protection services. It's kind of a complicated slide, but if you look at it, the blue line is the number of cases that are open as of, and we took April 1st, we started doing that years ago, so I just stuck with that. With April 1st of each year, that's the number of cases that are open for ongoing case management, which is the type of services you'll hear about from Sandra and Angie. The gray line is, excuse me, I think I put this wrong. Yeah. The blue line, excuse me, is the assessment services. The orange is the ongoing case management, and then overall is the gray. One of our issues has been that the number of assessments coming in has been such a high trajectory that workers are unable to get those assessments completed. They're really focused on making sure the children are safe, making sure that they have their needs, and then the paperwork needs to follow later. So you're seeing on there that overall our increases have been very large in the cases that are open currently. If we do it in a different way, you can see on this slide the average caseload per social worker. If we just average it out, we used to be in 2014, before the changes, at about 8 cases per worker. Right now we're at about 17, and the averages range between new workers being at about 5 or 6 to workers doing assessments having over 40 on their caseload. There are currently no mandated caseload limits in statute. This was a recommendation brought forth by the Governor's Task Force to have a caseload limit of 8 to 10 cases per social worker. That has not been enacted in statute. Should that become a mandate, and every legislative session it has been discussed, it would require at least 20 more social workers to bring our numbers down to that level. If we look at the expenditures and the resulting changes in costs, statewide, those costs have gone up. And again, it's kind of a complicated looking slide, but the main part is if you look at the top line, that is the increase of costs overall. There's been an increase in cost of staff, increase in cost of purchase services, which are included things like foster care, supervised visitation, drug testing, therapy. In 2015, the state infused into the system $23.5 million in new funding. However, the cost of children's services has increased across the state approximately $130 million per year. In summary, looking at the data, we've seen an increase in staff, but it hasn't matched up with the increases in the workload, as you can see by the numbers there, and I don't need to read those off to you. The increases in workload can have an impact on the ability of the social workers to meet the needs of the children and to assist the parents to safely meet the needs of children. It's resulted in increases in out-of-home placement, increases in court interventions, which then is also a stress on many other parts of our system and county departments, increase in children whose parental rights have been terminated, and again, the increase in county and state costs. Child protection is an area of high turnover for staff. That has been something that's been there for the 33 years that I've been working in human services and in child protection. That's always been an area of more turnover than other areas of social work. However, across the state, we've continued to see an increase with the changes. And again, as John had mentioned, that affects the services to families. We asked Sandra Cruz to come today to talk a little bit about her experience in the services that she provides ongoing to families and how some of that change and turnover in staff has affected that.
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Sandra Cruz. I have worked for Stearns County for about 15 years, and in August, 3 of those years will be in child protection. I'm an ongoing case manager with child protection, and when the assessment worker has determined that a family is in need of services, my job is to work with that family to discover the barriers that need to be addressed to return that child home or to keep the children in the home. These can include barriers such as chemical use, parenting skills, housing, mental health, or abuse that's occurring in the home. I work with the families to prevent placement, return children home, or in the case where the parents aren't able to parent and aren't able to address or choose not to address the barriers, then I make permanency decisions related to those children. Currently, my caseload consists of 10 families, which would be 29 parents and 24 children and 10 foster homes. Of the 24 children, only 2 of mine are not in out-of-home placement, and all are court-involved cases. In my position, the expectation is that I see the children on my caseload once every month. So I currently have children in homes that range from 250 miles away to right in the St. Cloud area. At one point in my time as a child protection worker, I had 19 cases on my caseload. Besides the expectation of seeing the children once a month, there's meeting with the parents, connecting with service providers such as mental health and chemical dependency, the schools, any individual therapists for the children and the parents, all the service providers working with the children, with the parents, and connecting with the foster parents, as well as the required paperwork such as case plans and the court times. Even though I've held my position for less than 3 years, I'm the 3rd most senior case manager in our division. In one of my cases, I'm the 5th case manager on this file. These children have been out of home for over 400 days. This family has met 5 workers, and when it takes time to update them on the service providers, what's going on with the children, and trying to get those children home, I have had service providers on this case express frustration on working with this many number of workers to help these children and this family. In my 3 years, I've seen a number of turnover with case managers. This highly impacts not only us as case managers, but the family and the children that we work with. As a case manager, you're building relationships with these children and the parents to help them identify and address barriers. When case managers leave those cases, those 10 cases have to be reassigned to somebody who already has a full caseload. The realities of this position are challenging. The families that we work with just need an established relationship to continue to overcome the barriers that they encounter to have their children return home to them. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra. Stearns County isn't alone, as I said, in the issue of worker turnover. Nationally, we find in data that high caseloads have led to increased staff turnover as well as increased costs and decreased quality of services. The turnover rates across Minnesota vary. We're not the highest. We're definitely not the lowest either. Ours is about 25% per year for the last couple years. There are some counties that have shared that they're experiencing as high as 55% turnover annually. According to the studies that we found, children with one social worker have had the ability to achieve permanency in almost 75% of the cases. That's pretty good. Working with some very difficult situations with families with lots of barriers. As you can see by the chart, however, as soon as you start changing workers during the time of working with that family, the success at getting to permanency goes from 75% down to 18% with just one change in worker. If you get to the point of having 5 different workers on a case, you're down to a 0.1% chance. We don't want that. We want our families to be successful. We want the children to be successful and have permanency with their families. The change in workers due to staff turnover really impacts the relationships of trust, and social work is really about developing those positive relationships and trust with the families so we can help them address their barriers. Additionally, staff turnover can affect the number of foster care placements and costs to the counties. It also affects the staff and supervisors who remain, decreasing efficiency and resulting in additional staff turnover. And some of those different effects are listed in this slide. So what are we doing about that? There's a few things that we're trying to do to impact some of the changes that have occurred and to address the turnover rate. First, as a department and through our state associations, both through AMC and MAXA, which is the Minnesota Association of County Social Service Administrators, we're focusing on several efforts to address the increases in services and caseloads and retention of our child protection workforce. At the state level, a primary emphasis this legislative session was to deal with the child protection withholds. That's the child protection funding that was allocated, the $23.5 million in 2015. that has the 20% withhold. The intent of the new funding was to really reduce the child protection caseloads by increasing the workforce. Withholding the funds delays and has an inability to plan for counties to budget and to really fully invest in increased staff. If you always have 25% of that, 20% that you're not sure if you're going to get, depending on how the year goes and being able to meet those performance measures, you really can't put all that into staff and resources until you know, February of the next year, whether or not you're going to get that funding. So it's very delayed. So what we've been trying to move forward is to have a sunset on the withholds and to move to a system like we have in many other areas where counties that are not able to make the performance measures have a performance improvement plan. That's a system that's in place. Many other areas, it's been very successful. Currently, the Senate has moved that position forward. Ms. Huberty and myself have both been down there to testify on behalf of the county and on behalf of MAXA. And that has moved right to the floor and has been included not only as a standalone bill but attached to other bills. Unfortunately, in the House currently, there has been some opposition, and it has been moved to looking at any of the unearned dollars being attached to supporting a child welfare training academy, thus reallocating funding meant to increase the child protection workforce. So we will see at the end of the legislative session how that ends up. Secondly, MAXA is supporting reformation of the child protection framework. Currently, the basis for determining if a child maltreatment assessment is needed and the time frame for intervening is really set on meeting specific criteria in the statute. We'd like to see it move to a framework that is based on safety and risk to a child. And just to give a little example of what does that really mean, all allegations of sexual abuse of a child require a response that someone like John needs to be out there and see that child in 24 hours or less from the time that we receive that report. That means that a child who may be in placement 3 hours from here does not have access, is not accessible by the perpetrator who may not even be in the home anymore, still requires that John go and see that child within 24 hours. So a 6-hour round trip to see the child who really is conditionally safe at this point. There is no access. That needs to be treated the same way as the child who reports having been abused last night. So it really, the way it's currently set up, it detracts from going out on those children that we feel are really at the highest risk right now when we hear about that report, because we need to base it on criteria.
And I would additionally add then that also participates in counties not making one of the withholds. So more money gets withheld from counties if you choose to make the common sense decision to keep children safe. Many of our cases come into intake, and it does not require a 24-hour response, but based on the statute, we're required to do that, and if we don't do that, we lose the money. So we are put in that unconscionable bind.
And I also want to mention that if there are truly children that are at high risk, we don't wait 24 hours.
No.
The staff are out there. They're out there at night. They're out there at weekends. Our job is to assure the safety of those children. But we really want to get to a whole system that's based on what is the safety and the risk at that immediate moment for that child. Another thing that we're working on, along with the state, is to adopt a collaborative safety model. This is an evidence-based practice. It uses the safety science that's behind the Aviation Administration, nuclear power research, and even the healthcare system. And it really supports accountability, and it focuses on looking at these cases and figuring out what are the factors that influence how work is done, instead of saying something happened and someone's to blame for it. It goes behind that and really looks at what happened before, what were the influences, and how can we truly change the system. This has been used in several states. It's transformed their systems. It's resulted in increased safety, increased trust, improved staff retention, and it really reduces the blame and focuses on addressing the systemic issues and increasing accountability.
And I would just add that what we're going to be doing in Stearns County is engaging frontline workers to be part of the solution so that we can find out what happens when adverse events happen. So have you ever seen those signs in construction sites that say it's been 362 days since an accident or injury occurs? Those are the most dangerous sites ever because it reinforces workers not to tell. And right now, we're in a situation where the statutes are terrorizing our child protection workers, making them the blame for any adverse effect that happens. And then what happens in your system is it reinforces don't talk, don't hide, don't do anything. And what we're going to do is shift that to now more of a tell us what happened, because it's not the worker's fault when a child dies. That's an event that happens to workers. It's not something that they caused, because these are not linear effects. When a child dies or a bad thing happens, it's a very complex system. It's a system that protects children. It is not one worker. As you can hear when they tell their stories, they have how many, 20, 30, 40 children. They can't be at 40 houses all day long, every day, 24/7. It isn't one person who protects children. It's the system. It is human services, it's the sheriff, it's the county attorney, the courts, the community. And so we are switching the way we focus on this so that we can get at a continuous improvement plan. And so anyway, that's in summary, that's what I would say what we're doing, moving forward from today.
And just a few other things to mention, that some of the things that we're trying to look at instituting, again, working alongside the workers, looking at their suggestions and their input on it, is how can we reduce the administrative burden on the workforce? How can we look at making things different for them? One is increasing the technology. How can we use that to help the staff? We will be implementing casework, social services version in mid-2018. That's to help us go paperless. It's to help reduce the time that they're spending doing all the paperwork, copying things, getting them sent to different places. Counties that have moved to that have experienced a decrease in paperwork that gives them more time to actually be doing the social work that they're trained to do and out helping families. We've seen that be a help in other areas of our department, in child support, in financial services. We're also looking at reviewing our intake and screening process. Melissa and I have asked the staff, tell us where there are areas where you feel like maybe we're over-screening things or that things just don't make sense. Let us try and bring those forward to the state. Let's look at those so that we do things that are best for our families. And then to reinvest in solution-focused early intervention and prevention strategies. It's getting back to working with the family and being able to have the time to do some really good safety planning, pulling in the neighbors, pulling in their family members. How do we assure safety so we're not needing to remove the children, but can really form safety around those children?
And I would just add that the research supports that, generally speaking, we are now over-screening in cases. We go from a bad event that happens and we get very reactionary as a system, and now everybody gets called and everybody's open to child protection. And, because people are wearing, kids are wearing flip-flops to school, and for any number of reasons, people are, calling in their neighbors. And so we have this very reactionary response to it when a bad event occurs.
And then lastly, we're looking at using our social services task force, and they have agreed to do that, to really have a focus this whole year instead of looking at many different areas, to really focus on child well-being and to help us develop a child well-being model within Stearns County. What this will do is we want to bring in some additional community partners as well and really look at setting the vision for Stearns County. What are our priorities? What are some recommendations of how we can change the system here? And then to help us monitor progress in the upcoming years. And again, that involves the input that we want from the staff. They're the ones out there working with the families on a day-to-day basis. They have some really good ideas that we want to, again, bring to join with our community members to have a better system within Stearns County. And we will be back on that hopefully later this summer to let you know what that looks like as we work on it. So we wanted to end today with Angie DeGroat, who again is the Child Protection Case Manager, and she's going to talk a little bit about efforts to increase work with extended families and kinship and some practice implications for the workers.
Thank you, Brenda. Mr. Chair and Commissioners, good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Angie DeGroat, and I'm a Child Protection Case Manager at Stearns County. I've been employed here since November of 2010. As the number of cases have continued to increase in Stearns County, so have the number of children in out-of-home placement. As previous slides reflect, case managers are averaging more than 10 open case or work groups, with the majority of these cases being open in court and children in out-of-home placement. Stearns County Human Services has invested in looking for relative foster home placements for children, with about 50% of Stearns County children being placed in relative care. Currently, I have 13 open work groups with 32 children. 30 of these 32 children have either been in foster care or currently remain in foster care. Or excuse me, all of those kids have been. 30 have been with relative foster care placements, or we have done a temporary transfer of custody to the non-custodial parent. When children are placed with relatives, it can increase demands on the social worker. These demands include travel time to foster homes outside of Stearns County, increased phone calls and home visits to support relative foster parents through the foster care process, as they have not gone through all of the training that our other licensed foster homes have. Stearns County Human Services is also working to increase the support to families and prevent placements in the assessment phase by safety planning with extended relatives and kin. This is also very time intensive for social workers to coordinate safety planning meetings, monitor safety plans, and implement voluntary services without a court order. With these increased demands on workers, there is also increased benefits to the children and families that Stearns County serves. When children can safely remain out of foster care, we reduce the amount of trauma that kids are exposed to. Children who are placed with relatives often have a significant relationship with these individuals. They are familiar with the provider, and the providers are familiar with the children. Relatives are aware of the children's previous history and can help to arrange for or make appropriate recommendations for referrals. Relatives are often more willing to work through challenging behaviors with the kids due to their relationship versus non-relatives. Some relatives are willing to support the parent-child relationship and help provide visitation and support to the parents throughout all aspects of their case plan. If permanency needs to be established, it is the relatives who have been providing care for the children over the placement period that often become the permanency option for the children, reducing the number of moves for the child and increasing their stability. So I want to leave you with an example of how relative foster care not only supports the children and the parents, but also the county. I am currently working with a family, and the children are placed with relatives outside of Stearns County lines. The relatives live approximately 45 minutes from the parents' residence. At this time, Stearns County is ready to reunify the children, as the parents have been compliant with all court-ordered case plan requirements and have obtained housing. Due to housing being subsidized, the children need to reside with them for more than 50% of the time. So this leaves us in a bind. Either we move the children home and they transition to their third school of this school year, or we leave them in foster care and the parents lose out on their housing, allowing them to stay or requiring them to stay in foster care even longer. The relatives that they're living with have committed to assisting the parents to drive the children to their current school, so they do not need to transition schools with 1 month left. They have coordinated a plan for the kids to stay with the relatives a couple nights a week through the rest of the school year and take turns driving to and from school and or meeting halfway in the mornings and afternoons to relieve some of the burden on the parents. With this commitment from the relatives, the children would have transitioned to their school year or third school this year with 1 month left, or the parents would have missed out on their housing opportunity. It is really often the support and help from our relative providers that can help our families succeed, not only while their child protection case is open, but to help them succeed long term to help prevent children from coming back into care. Thank you.
All right, with that, we are open to questions.
Commissioner Merrick.
Wow, complicated. I'll start with that word. There's so much information there, it's really hard to comprehend all of that, at least it is for me. So I'm not sure if other board members are going to have questions. I have some here, but it would be nice to get, I always like an executive summary, that's 1 page, of some Q&As. I'm going to just read just a couple of things that I have here, and I don't know if we need this to have this at another meeting, but you talk about some of these folks being out of Stearns County, 250 miles away, I don't understand that. You talk about paperwork that it takes a while for the paperwork to follow up. Why don't we have more of that electronically? Staff over is an issue, and so there's a cost, and so do we have dollars as to what that costs the system? You talk about different changes legislatively, locally. It would be nice to have a calendar of events, so to speak, that we expect this to be done by this date, this by that date, and if we don't get done, these are the ramifications, something along those lines. And then how much of this is legislative and how much is local? Yeah. So I don't know, those are just some general comments that I have here, and I don't know if you want to respond to each of those like today or if you want to come back another time.
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, we will definitely respond to all of those questions and write them down so you can have the answers. But just generally, I would say, with all respect to our government, when you have the federal government and the state government involved and you get 93 recommendations, you're talking administrative burden at the end. It means paperwork to the point that you're bogged down so much you are stuck in the office. It doesn't matter if you have the best technology in the world. You are doing paperwork. And if it's electronic or written out, it helps to have it more electronic, and we are going to go more electronic this year with our new system. It still bogs the workers down because it becomes, you must write down everything you're doing. And so if you're having to do that, you are not out with the family, relating with the families as much.
I wonder if I could interrupt for just a minute. So if a case comes in, you know, or you say writing things down, are you able to share that with the entire staff in your department, or is there some data privacy that you can't, that you can't share that information? Because once it's in the system, and there was some discussion, I think it was with the court system, where they can share information, so you don't have to do data entry more than once, just one time, and then everybody sees it. So anything along those lines?
Yes, Commissioner Merrick, I can answer that a little bit. The data in the child services area goes into what's called SSIS, the Social Service Information System. There are different security clearances to have access to that. So all the social workers that work in child protection have access to the information in depth about those families, so they can help each other out and they can cover for that. They don't have access to services that might be in chemical dependency because there's a lot of federal laws, so that has to be protected much more with data privacy. Other parts of our department, in financial services, they don't have access to what's in the social service system, and that has to do again with data privacy rights and protection of privacy, of confidential and private information. But they do have some access to what's in there. They don't have to write it twice. But as Ms. Huberty stated, we're in a system and a time where everything has to be detailed and documented very well, because there's a lot of concern about if you don't write it down, it didn't happen. When you go into court, if you testify, or if someone wants to, we get a call and Department of Human Services wants to see what we did on a case because they had a complaint. If it's not documented, there's no way to assure that it happened. So there's really a lot of focus on making sure that all the paperwork's there. And the information system is also the way that the state looks at how services are done. It's connected with all the funding that comes from both the state and federal, and it feeds into federal information. So it gets pretty complex.
Yes, Mr. Chair, Commissioners, I would agree with all that she said, obviously. I would just additionally add that, like I said, you can have the best technology in the world, which we could use in this case, and it would help. But when we have a very reactionary system to adverse events, so something bad happens, we're in a mode of reaction. What happens is we get 100 new rules about what we have to do to follow, and so that's what's bogging us down. Even if we can document it quickly, it's a lot of rules, a lot of administrative oversight and burden to just prove that you're doing something. And that takes time. That takes a good chunk of workers' time to do that, instead of them being out with families. And so that's what the current circular system is. When a bad event happens, there's this big reaction. Usually we get more rules, not less rules. And what we find when we get into the system is that the more rules actually decrease child safety. It makes us feel good to add rules, like, okay, now we're going to protect children. But the more that rule goes up, the more we have, child safety goes down. And we know this by research. It's very well researched and supported. But we still do it as a system. And so that's what we're trying to stop.
Expanding on Commissioner Merrick here, with the data privacy, you said chemical dependency, you'd have no interaction with that, but isn't that maybe sometimes part of the issue as to why these people are involved with social services?
Yes, Commissioner Merkin. I was speaking more globally in that we have some securities between different areas. So if workers that are working in chemical dependency have more access to that information, the child protection workers would have a specific release from the family in order to gain access to that information.
So they can
But we
get-
they can access it.
Okay.
But that was just an example of, there are sometimes beyond the scope of Minnesota rules, we have some federal rules, and especially chemical dependency, we have to make sure that we get more releases and more authorizations in order to access them.
Thank you. Anyone else? Commissioner?
Yeah, I'd like to say thanks, for sharing this with us. And with that, the question I had is, when you, what is the original trigger? Somebody calls or somebody sees an issue, contacts law enforcement or somebody, and then the initial visit, is that, like John goes out there on his own, or is there cases where, you need either an officer with, or how can you explain how you provide like safety for some of the workers if they're going out in the evening, or some of these households maybe aren't very stable?
Right. Yes, Commissioner Notch, I think I can answer that, and I also asked John if he wants to add anything to it. So the initial call typically comes from anybody in the community. It can be from a professional, they're mandated if they have concerns, or from what we call a voluntary report, which is neighbor, relative, anybody that sees something. Those come in, we look at each report, we go through a screening, we see if it meets criteria. Part of currently our screening team includes law enforcement, and that has been a huge benefit, I think, as far as safety for workers, because we can determine right up front if it's a situation that they're going to go out on with the social worker. And if there's a safety concern, we have wonderful law enforcement with our police departments and our sheriff's departments, and especially having them at the screening so they know what we're looking at. They can give us information to say, yeah, we've been to that neighborhood. We're going with you. We don't want you to go out alone. Or there are times where they will say, we need to go and do X, Y, and Z first, and we want you kind of in the background. So there's a lot of coordination with that. That's some of those cases. There are the bulk of our cases, though, that the workers are going out on their own. And we try and do the best we can to assure that they're safe, and sometimes that includes they're going out at nights or on weekends as well. John, anything you want to add?
Commissioner Notch, I would just add that, like Brenda said, our law enforcement is very good at communicating with us when there's an issue, if there's a concern that they don't want us, interrupting an investigation they might have going, or they might have known safety concerns. They communicate that to us very well. On the cases where we don't have law enforcement responding with us, I can think of a time where I haven't asked for assistance from another worker to go with me and tag team something and go out and say, okay, I don't feel safe on my own. It's not something that law enforcement necessarily needs to come along with, but somebody to come with, and absolutely we'll go as a team, or we'll coordinate, or send a message to somebody, hey, I'm going into this address, check on me in a half hour, and if you don't hear from something, notify somebody. So we do it as a team.
Okay. And then one other question, this might be just a statistical thought maybe, on your page 8, that one chart you had, where you had the kind of the dip down in the 2008 to 2000, and then it started going back up. Is there any correlation, you think, to, that was obviously when the economy kind of went down, where people maybe retrench or something, and then now as times get better, there's a correlation to all of a sudden there's more activity of this nature?
Commissioner Notch, I smile as you say that, because when the economy changed so drastically back in about 2008, we expected our numbers to go up. There was a lot of talk across the state. We thought, with all the stress on families. But what we found mirrors what I've since learned with research, that when things get really tight like that, families tend to pull together and they can hold on for a while. And I do think that probably had an impact on it, that those families, we didn't have the spike right away that things started going on. But families can only do that for so long, and that's what it's showing in research too. So I think that went along with, we started going up again right before then, all the changes with statute, and it just kind of became a perfect storm, that families were feeling that impact, they couldn't hang on any longer, and then we had some bad things happen in Minnesota. We had a whole lot of recommendations, a lot more oversights and regulations, and the numbers have just continued to rise.
Yeah, and I guess I would echo it too. It seems like we are always reactionary. It seems that it doesn't matter what business or enterprise we're in. you know, it's like we feel we have to give people immediate results instead of stepping back and saying, well, let's analyze it a little bit first
Right.
before we just throw things out there. And, you know, Ms. Huber and I have had comments on daycare issues too that I've been getting calls on. It's, you know, we're just so reactionary. It's like, I don't know if government feels that people need an answer right away, so they throw stuff out there to make it look like they're doing something, but.
Commissioner Knotts, that's exactly what happens. And we aim to have a less reactionary response in Stearns County, and we're working on it on a statewide level as well.
Are you getting any positive results on the state side, or?
Commissioner Knotts, Mr. Chair, Commissioners, yes, we have. The state, and actually maybe Brenda can speak to this better than I can, but the state has engaged some folks who do this on a national level on training, and they have them on staff now or on contract doing training across Minnesota. So everybody from workers on up to directors are being trained on the new collaborative safety model, which is what we're talking about today. And so that's a positive direction, I think. And because as a state, if we join together when adverse events happen, hopefully we'll be less reactionary as an entity. I don't know if you want to add anything further.
Sure, Commissioner Knott. What Ms. Huberty mentioned with the collaborative safety model came out of Tennessee, and they had a situation much like we experienced in Minnesota in 2014. They had a very serious child protection matter, child fatality. It had a lot of press. They had a lot of reaction, a lot of legislative changes that were passed, a little bit of money thrown at it, and they came in, a couple of the people, let me back up. There were some changes then in the leadership, just as we had it in our Department of Human Services here back in 2014-15. Some of the new people that were brought in said, we're going to do this differently. And they went to looking at the safety science, what's used in aviation, what's used in nuclear power, you know, really critical type situations. And they looked at changing what they did in their system. And they were able to make some huge changes. They have since, they are now, instead of being in their Department of Human Services in Tennessee, are now on contract with them to continue to provide support. This is several years later. And they've gone out now and they have worked with Arizona, which, if you've ever read the news over the years, has had some huge issues in their child protection system. That system has made some great changes in the last 2 years. They're doing that. The city of New York has made changes. They have lower out-of-home placements now than the state of Minnesota, as I read just this morning. So they are working in Wisconsin and a few other places, and we're very hopeful with that. Department of Human Services brought them in initially to look at child fatalities, but we really see that this work is something that we can implement across children's services and maybe even in how we address some adult services.
Absolutely. Across adult protection as well, this works.
Any other questions?
Just a couple comments. First of all, I want to thank you for your work. It's not the cheeriest work we have going on in the county, and I'm sure you see things that are not so happy and things that need to be dealt with, so I appreciate you dealing with those. But as far as being reactionary too, we do react because we know when there are children in situations where they're being harmed or being abused, we want to end that as quickly as possible. But I know it's very difficult because there's many underlying issues that put them into that situation, so yeah.
Commissioner Merrick?
Yeah, just to follow up to what I said earlier, are you going to be coming back with answers to the questions that I had then?
Commissioner Merrick, we'd be happy to do that.
Okay, and then on the staff turnover, you know, what are the recommendations or what's coming forward to address that particular issue? And then, and I know it's been said many times, but it needs to be said over and over and over again, that if we could spend as much money on prevention as we do on the cure,
Yes.
we'd solve a lot of ills in our society, and I know that's just kind of out there, but so we've got things like the Nurse Family Partnership, we've got SHIP, we've got the ACES program, and there's many, many others, and if we can work on that end of it more, we wouldn't have to be talking as much about this, so I'll wait to hear from you. Thank you.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Anything else? Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
At this time, we will close the Human Services meeting and reconvene the regular county board meeting. And before we have the auditor treasury reports, we're going to take a 5-minute break. We're back, and we have the Auditor Treasurer's Report. We have Chad Martini here. Chad?
Good morning, Commissioners.
morning.
Chad Martini from the Auditor Treasurer's Office. Speaking to you as drainage administrator, I guess, for lack of a better term. I have with me today Cale Van Bruggen from Rinke Noonan. Cale assists me a great deal and the Drainage Authority with all matters related to drainage. My goal here today is to present an inspection report to you from County Ditch 28. There's a long history with County Ditch 28, a lot of information collected, a lot of requests from the Two Rivers Lake area. I also wanted to mention that I do have some additional people in the crowd today to, either support my presentation if the board has questions, or interested parties. Chris Otterness, engineer from Houston Engineering, has been somebody I've relied on in the past to help make sense of some of the engineering data. And Mr. Dan Brady, representing the Two Rivers Lake Association, is also in attendance today.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Chad, are you going to be talking at all about how the water flows from either back from the St. Martin or Albany area into this? Is that going to be a part of your discussion?
No.
Okay.
Do you want it to be?
Well, I don't want to drag the meeting out, but as we talked about before, there's a lot more water than just right here.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And we'll get into some of the details
Okay.
of the inspection report and what it does cover. First and foremost, typically, I should give some background on the ditch first for just a refresher for commissioners who might not deal with this as often or even viewing public. County Ditch 28 is located between Albany and Holdingford. Two Rivers Lake actually splits the ditch into kind of a lower and upper half. The upper half of County Ditch 28 serves as the outlet for Two Rivers Lake. The ditch system was established in 1906. With regards to the inspection report, it's a compilation of information Stearns County staff, working with local residents and various other vendor partners, have collected going back to 2011 and as recently as this spring. The focus of the report is mainly on the northern portion of the ditch, mainly because that's where many of the questions from landowners have come, and that's just been where the focus historically has been. Now at this point, talking about the inspection report, typically the normal process we followed with inspection reports here at Stearns County has been, I typically would put them on consent agenda. An inspection report, and Kayla, you can chime in if I'm going down the wrong path on this, but typically an inspection report is not necessarily a controversial document. It's not a document that comes with repair plans or recommendations along that point. Inspection is just simply that. It's staff going out, evaluating what's happening in the ditch. Typically, if there were concerns staff had that might warrant a repair discussion, we would bring that back as a repair plan. So for today, just to kind of get things moving, I'd like to ask the board to accept the inspection report into the official County Ditch 28 record, and then if you're willing to make that motion and accept it, we'll get into much more detail of the inspection report and also kind of some of the history and kind of where we're at today with the ditch.
What are the board's wishes?
Well, I guess I'll make the motion to accept the inspection report if we're at that point.
Second.
It's been moved, it's been seconded. Any further discussion before voting? Seeing none, all in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, Commissioners. So now I'll just briefly try to go through, I'm going to try to provide some context today on kind of what staff has found, what residents have shared with us over the years, just to kind of build some context of where we're at. And I want to start with a historical, just a little bit of history with CD 28. It's no secret the lake's always been prone to flooding. It's a flat area. There's a lot of water in the area. In 2013, the DNR did some engineering modeling revolving a low water ford. Some of the board members may remember that. I think the goal was to basically try to evaluate impact to the lake that low water ford might have had. 2014 We had a staff on-field review with vendors to review repair locations. I believe there was a member or members from the Lake Association. Commissioner Mergen, I believe you were out there with us at that time. 2015, the Soil Water Conservation District, with a grant, worked with a engineering firm named Respect to look at some clean water opportunities. That plan worked in the watershed, worked in and around Two Rivers Lake. In 2015, we were actually able to do 2 repairs, which the Lake Association funded. They were 2 repairs, 10 feet wide, 100 feet long, roughly. And then more recently in 2017, we had another request from the Lake Association to address another area in the ditch toward the end near County Road 17.
Chad, if I may interrupt, the number one thing, you talk about the lake flooding, and you're just showing it right now. The past Planning Commission meeting, and on the agenda earlier today, we had one of the issues was with a lot and having it split in the development of 2 pieces. And there was testimony at the public hearing under the Planning Commission about the issue of flooding, and those residents were opposed to us splitting that property into 2 more developable lots. Well, there are a good number of parcels still remaining in that area. And so what do we do about the direction of that? I mean, you have landowners that have the ability to, split the parcel up and put homes in there, yet you're showing us that flooding.
Yeah, I mean, Stearns County, especially in and around a lot of our ditches, the ditches are there because there are problems with water, and certainly, and we'll talk a little bit more about some of the land use changes and some of the impact that it has in the area. One of the reasons I wanted to show photos, and I believe these photos came from residents on the lake, but just to illustrate and acknowledge that certainly myself and people I work with, there's no question that as a property owner of the lake, the flooding is real. I don't think that's a question. I think unfortunately some of the solutions have been a little more difficult to find. But I did want to acknowledge that from a perspective when we're working with people, requesting help, we certainly acknowledge the problem that exists out there. Here's a historical comparison between 2015 and 1938. 1938 clearly being a drier year, but I don't know if this slide really tells us anything other than, the ditch as it exists today certainly is bigger and carrying more water, but just more of an interesting comparison than anything else. I want to talk a little bit about kind of where we're at with the current request. So in the map graphic, Two Rivers Lake is at the bottom of the page. In red at the top, we see the proposed repair location just south of County Road 17, north of the holding ford covered bridge. You'll see that water in the ditch flows from the lake to the north. And I also wanted to include this kind of snippet, this graph that shows it's information from a 2014 elevation profile that engineering firm created on behalf of the Lake Association. And essentially is what this tells us is that in this area, the goal for the Lake Association's request is to remove about 1 foot of sediment or ditch bottom, however you want to describe it. So that's kind of the nature of the request here. Historically, my understanding with working with the Lake Association is based on the 2014 elevation profile they commissioned, the goal has been to kind of look at that profile as a whole and, essentially for lack of a, better term, lop off the peaks to try to smooth out the ditch with the idea that water would flow better. Those are the nature of the request as I understand it. One of the folks that I had asked to kind of help support me today was the Soil Water Conservation District, just in respects to the study that they did. That was a 9-month study. It looked at the watershed as a whole, didn't focus on the ditch, but they had certainly some information came out of that was relevant. When you talk about clean water, a lot of the things you do to mitigate clean water problems also aid in flooding problems. I'll do my best to represent the talking points and the information that Soil Water Conservation gave me today, since they weren't able to be here. But Certainly land use changes affect the amount of runoff and sediment transport. And I don't think there's even a question that over time, some of the people changes in the area certainly impact water runoff. Progress depends on addressing the source of the input. We know that this watershed dumps a lot more water into the lake than can leave through the ditch. Soil Water Conservation District, as a mission, is always looking to partner with property owners to mitigate runoff and sediment transport issues. From their perspective, the Two Rivers Lake and River are using the floodplain as they should. The next slide, we see the south part of Two Rivers Lake. Everything in blue is the floodplain. It's the 100-year floodplain. I think from a global watershed perspective, my understanding from Soil Water Conservation District is, everything in blue, carved out by the glaciers whenever, Mother Nature kind of put that there to be the spillover when flooding does occur. I make no judgments as to how to interpret that or how that impacts, certainly people that live there. Another graphic here, you probably can't see it in the slide, but there's ordinary high water level. It's a green line. You see a lot of docks, a lot of yards in that. My understanding from the DNR is they would say everything to the ordinary high water level is, I'm probably butchering this, but considered part of the lake. Again, just an overview of just some of the information that Soil Water is sharing with me, kind of leading up to the positive aspects of what they're doing to try to mitigate issues out there. They've recently sent 300 letters to landowners, essentially looking for volunteer partners to work on mitigation efforts. They're following up with 10 landowners who want to look at some water runoff control and sediment reduction planning. Also, PCA and DNR have an intensive watershed monitoring in this area. They've identified 30 specific sites. SWCD is going to be following up on those. So these aren't necessarily ditch-related things, but they are things that the SWCD is working to try to proactively, I think, catch up to some of the land use changes. The land use changes happen exponentially faster than these types of fixes can happen. Overview of data available. I think, in talking about evaluating from a staff perspective what the issues are in the lake, we have to talk a little bit about what kind of data and information we have available to look at. 2013, the DNR did some modeling. 2014, Houston Engineering, as a vendor working for the Lake Association, created an elevation profile. I'm sure there's more to it, but essentially, that's what my understanding of it is. And then more recently, the Lake Association's contracted with Bolton and Mink, using the same licensed engineer they worked with at Houston Engineering at that time, to do some additional modeling of the lake to, I think, try to convey a message of where there might be opportunities for repair. Is that a fair way to categorize that, Cale? Just want to look at my notes to make sure I'm not missing anything. This is all great data to have. One of the problems we still have is legally we don't have an established as constructed bottom. So even though an engineer went out there, they estimated the bottom. There's not a legally recognized elevation bottom of that ditch. And the long and short of that is that's essentially the crux of where the DNR is at in terms of their oversight. And we'll get into the DNR here a little bit in the next slide. I know as Stearns County staff, we've spoke with the engineer that prepared this information from Bolton and Mink. We've contracted with 2 other engineers to help us as staff understand what the data means. I'm not an engineer. We don't have engineers on staff. We have to rely on our own experts to help us interpret what engineering data and that scientific data really means. Talking about the DNR a little bit, I know this is from working with Commissioners Mergen and Notch. Working with the DNR has been really the center point of where we're at from a drainage authority in terms of the DNR has jurisdiction because this is a public water designation. CD 28 is also Two Rivers River. The DNR has jurisdiction. Stearns County can't work independently of the DNR, and Cale can certainly speak at length, I'm sure, of the legal requirements or jurisdiction the DNR has, but we were able to work with the DNR in 2015 to allow those 2 repairs I mentioned earlier. 2017, the Lake Association makes another request for repair. The nature of working with the DNR is different this time. From a regulatory standpoint, the DNR is requiring more information this time before allowing work in the ditch. The DNR's main concern is any repair opportunity that equates to digging in the ditch, how that might affect Two Rivers Lake. At this point, my understanding from the DNR is they're looking for 2 pieces of information at a minimum to even entertain any repair request, and that is the legal as constructed ditch bottom elevations. The word legal is key here. That's a right, wrong, or indifferent. Having a legally established ditch bottom elevation is different than having an estimated elevation. And again, if we want to get into detail, that Cale can certainly speak to the legal aspects. And then the DNR wants to know what impact that will have to the lake. They want to protect the lake. They want to maintain the lake water elevation. And so that's kind of their goal. And so they're saying they need more information. We don't have it right now. Cale, do you have any? Am I missing anything here?
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, I think the easiest way to think about this is think of the lake as having a water budget. It had a natural amount of water that it held before CD28 was constructed. Then CD8 was constructed, and we know what the design plans were of that system, but we don't know what the as-constructed actual levels were. And that's what's key for you if you're going to consider repair. It's also what's key in DNR considering their permit, and us in enforcing what our rights are back to DNR as to what levels we can repair to. And that's what none of these engineering firms have yet looked at, is what was the as-constructed condition. The Bolton and Mink survey looked at how much capacity of the system is flowing based on what its intent was in design, and Houston Engineering made an estimation of that, but no one has yet looked at that, establishing what was that as-constructed level. And unfortunately, the county's records don't show that there was an as-constructed profile done in 1906 when the system was established. Once you get past that part, then the question for you is, if this is out of repair based on establishing that bottom, is a repair necessary and in the best interests of these landowners? And that's where, for me, the water budget comes in. We know there's what SWCD is saying, increased pressure into that budget coming from upstream, where what we don't know is, even if this system is repaired, is the increased pressure coming from upstream so great that a repair wouldn't alleviate the flooding? We won't know that until we know what's that as-constructed bottom, and engineers look into that. So that's really the gate here as to what's next and what would need to be considered if you're going to consider repair and go down that path. What Chad presented to you in the inspection report is that obvious obstructions, things that can be fixed without a DNR permit, like log jams, things that have fallen into the river, from that perspective, the system is okay. It meets the inspection report.
Yeah.
But now we're really talking about, we don't know what that as-constructed bottom is.
Okay. You talked about upstream pressure. What does that mean? Are we talking about north of County Road 17, where all of that obstruction is? Is that what you call upstream pressure? Or?
Well, I think what we're talking about is similar to what Commissioner Merrick was referring to, where you're getting water from, it's the opposite. You're pouring more water into the funnel. So it's coming from the south in this case, because the ditch flows north, not south. But
you're talking about that side, all right.
Certainly north of the, having been out there, I know if you stand on the culverts on County Road 17, there's certainly, any culvert's going to be a limiting factor in allowing water to move. And unfortunately, County Ditch 28 ends at County Road 17, and beyond that is Two Rivers River, which is a mess. It's filled with oxbows, it's twisty, there's trees in it, but we have no jurisdiction to even entertain fixing that.
Has any work been done with the DNR to try and coordinate something as far as some sort of clean out of that area? Because remember, when we were out there, we had 2 construction outfits with us, and both of them said that it's not going to help to clean out below that unless this gets cleaned out?
Respectfully, Chair Mergen, I'm having a hard enough time negotiating with the DNR on doing work in the ditch, much less outside of the ditch. So to answer your question, no.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, and I just want to maybe push on that a little bit further. The DNR's attitude in these situations sometimes seems to be that maybe more in line with that comment on the SWCD slide, seeing this as this is how this watershed is meant to act. But I think what is missing from that comment is we don't know what the impact was of the as-constructed ditch in 1906 because we don't have those records.
Yeah, what happens if we can never find those?
There's a process under 103E for reestablishing those records, where it involves the board initiating that process, requires you to hire an engineer, and then the engineer's job is to evaluate all of the records that we do have and then do some on-site analysis to put together ultimately what accumulates in an engineer's report, which is a recommendation to the board as to what that engineer believes the as-constructed profile and right-of-way was of the drainage system. Then the board notices and holds a public hearing on that report. You take comments, and then ultimately you adopt and approve a final report. What that does then is shifts the burden. Now you have something as a drainage authority to rely on when you order repair to say, we're going to repair to that as constructed report. And it's the burden of anybody, including the DNR, who challenges that profile that was set in that report to show that, no, that's not the as constructed condition. It's what allows proceedings for repair to move forward. But that's kind of the gate. Until we have that profile, that line, we're not entitled to that burden shifting presumption.
Any legal
Commissioner
challenge to the, excuse me, Commissioner Merrick, go ahead.
So when you say as constructed, the lay of the land is different in 2018 than it was in 1906, obviously, with development and everything. So is that taken into consideration?
Mr. Chair and Commissioner Merrick, it is. And if you want further comment on the depth of scope of that investigation, that is something we could have Mr. Otterness from Houston Engineering come up and talk about on others that you've done. But current land use compared to what land use was before is often something you see in those reports.
So currently where we're at, we were advised by DNR in 2017 based on the Lake Association request for repair to submit a public waters permit. The permit wasn't accepted, it wasn't denied, it just kind of stalled because we weren't able to demonstrate the legal bottom of the ditch. Any legal challenge to the DNR's jurisdiction is based on having an as-constructed ditch bottom, either from actual 1906 engineering records, which never seem to exist, or by going through the process Cale described. Actually, Cale's stealing all my thunder today. I actually have a slide about this, but you pretty much covered, so I'll just go through it, but there's some dollar amounts here that are key when talking about this. It's staff's understanding that any repair in County Ditch 28 is dependent on having a reestablishment of records process. It's a legal process we would follow as Cale documented. Without that, I don't see any path forward with DNR jurisdiction on this. We do have an estimated cost from last fall to do just that of $12,000 from Houston Engineering. I do want to add that that doesn't include staff time. It's important to note that because we leverage our survey field crew so heavily for surveying services, that we're able to get that price of the Houston engineering cost is lower because we'll do the surveying ourselves. But typically guidance from the auditor and this board, we generally like to account for at least a portion of the staff time on that. As Cale mentioned, this specific engineering service is a starting point. It kind of opens the door for us to start working with the DNR on planning and considering repairs. At this point, scope and cost really from where we are today to getting to a point where we can execute a repair, I can't tell you what the scope or cost of that is going to be. I'm still not 100% sure specifically what other engineering services beyond this the DNR may require. They may not require anything. I suspect they will, the DNR's talked openly in the past about the possibility of a control structure on the lake outlet to maintain the lake water elevation. It would take an engineer to figure out how to build a dam on the ditch and still allow water to move. And I mean, they're what the lake associations are requesting, what the DNR is telling me, they're contradicting wants. DNR wants to maintain the lake level. The lake association wants to allow the lake to handle more water during the rain events. This kind of gets into some of the conclusions that essentially Cale's probably already talked about. But from a staff perspective, I did want to talk a little bit more about what we found in the inspection report. Any future requires at a minimum, from my perspective, a reestablishment process. Without this information, there's no way to move forward with the DNR. As Cale mentioned, as your duly appointed ditch inspector, all our inspections are visual in nature. We can look for things in the ditch. We can look for trees. We can look for beaver dams. We can look for slumping, islands that represent sediment piles. Identifying the problems and solutions beyond that are matters of engineering. And the Lake Association, to their credit, is trying to be proactive and trying to gather engineering that puts them in a position to, try to improve the ditch from their, I shouldn't say improve, repair the ditch from their perspective to, get more water out of there. Inspection report, the way I inspect ditches, the way I'm able to inspect ditches from a visual standpoint, I don't have a fixable repair option to give you today. It's a matter of engineering. We would need more information. Anything taken out of the ditch will obviously assist in moving more water. What's undetermined is, what is the specific impact? I showed you the pictures earlier of flooded out docks and pontoons. I've always tried to think of County District 28 from a perspective of, if I'm a landowner and I have that kind of flooding, what would a repair look like that would move water away from me so I can use my property the way I want to? I don't know what that is at this point. I haven't found any of my vendor experts to give me clarity on that matter. I do know and feel comfortable saying that a piecemeal approach isn't nearly as effective as repairing the entire outlet. It's 3 miles from lake to end of ditch. Again, using the engineers that I contract with to leverage their expertise, because I don't have any, lopping off these peaks of sediment one at a time doesn't have the same impact as if you just did the whole thing at once. I'm sorry, Cale. Getting a little armsy up here.
Chad, just to interrupt, with the flooding from the Lake Association, the actual problem, is it just spring flooding, which is temporary, more of a nuisance, or is it problematic throughout the entire year?
To be honest, Commissioner Persky, I'm probably not the best person to ask that. If the board wishes to know that, they could certainly ask Dan Brady to speak. I know he's here. I'm sure he'd be happy to share his thoughts.
Okay, go ahead, Dan.
Okay, you can hear me from here?
No. Yep. You have to give your name and address.
Dan Brady, 19378 Two Rivers Road, Avon. I think to answer your question, we did do a repair a couple of years ago, and the last 2 springs we've only had flooding of about 3 or 4 inches, both springs. So even right now, 4 inches, and it just peaked yesterday. So that really is not the problem. The problem is the 3, 4, 5, 6 inch rainfalls that we keep getting, and the water that comes pouring in is incredible. We had about a 1 foot flood last summer as a result, which compared to the 3 foot flood that we had prior to doing the repair, for about the same amount of rainfall, about 6.5 inches of rain, created that 3 foot flood that we had, and that was pretty devastating. The 1 foot flood from the same amount of rain last summer was far more tolerable. That's just a nuisance almost, compared to what we've been dealing with. This particular
request was when we had the engineer model the flow. He said there's that one spot just downstream of the covered bridge, the channel necks down, and apparently sediment from when they were putting the covered bridge in and doing whatever they were doing just accumulated right there where it necked down. And he said that kicks up enough that in his model it just about got to the lake. So it made the lake a little higher than what it would normally have been. He also identified some areas that would flood Holding Ford, but not my property, where, for example, under County Road 17, the culverts, he says there's enough sediment in there that it will cause local flooding right within within a few hundred feet of County Road 17. Now, it would seem to me that you would be able to clean that out without going through the DNR, but apparently that is yet to be determined. So even the County Road 17 culverts, you may not be able to touch without going through this process. So,
does that 17 culvert have a cement bottom on it?
Yeah, there's 4 half-round cement culverts. So flat on the bottom and round on the top.
Okay. Back to my original question. So when you do get the heavy rainfalls, are you seeing it a nuisance where you've got the flooding on the green space in front of the cabins, let's say for several days, or are you actually getting water into some of the sheds and excuse me, maybe some of the other structures?
With a 1 foot flood, we're pretty much right up to the edges of the structures. It'll get right up to them, but not enter them. Anything higher than that, and it would go in. 6 inches of rain in 2 days seems to be like every summer now.
Yeah.
We missed some of the 8-inch rainfalls, and that would have for sure, ran into the homes and underneath the into the foundations. And that's really the issue: is the foundations get hammered when the water gets under the structures. My home is only 13 years old this year, and I've got to do foundation repairs on all 4 corners of popping out.
Okay.
So
I'm good.
Okay.
Thank you.
The Bolton and Mink model, I don't know how to address this model. The engineering report doesn't necessarily, I'm not privy to the discussions Mr. Brady has with the engineer that performed it. The report doesn't necessarily highlight specific, it doesn't make recommendations per se. I'm not arguing anything that Mr. Brady shared with you. I just, in terms of interpreting data, those specific locations where there might be problems aren't in the report. I've worked with 2 different engineers, and maybe I'm wrong about that, but that's my understanding from contracting with engineers to help me understand it. The Bolton and Mink model shows a 0.4 foot reduction of surface water profile, and I did ask what that means. Again, if I'm a lake owner, what does that mean? And essentially, I'm going to paraphrase Mr. Otterness here, but generally it would reduce the frequency of problems, similar to the experience Mr. Brady sounds like he's sharing with you. It would reduce the frequency, but it certainly won't prevent flooding. It might just reduce frequency, duration, and depth. That's how I'm interpreting what a 0.4 foot reduction in surface water. And that's if all 3 miles of the outlet were repaired. That is the one thing when I spoke with the Bolton and Mink engineer, he was clear that the model was for all 3 miles. He didn't necessarily get into what the impact would be for specific spot repairs. And then, of course, it comes back to the DNR concerns related to protecting lake water elevations, which at this point the DNR is not satisfied with understanding what this apparent 0.4 reduction in surface water might mean to the lake and what they're charged with protecting. So we have these 2 conflicting pieces. Staff conclusion, based on my inspections, there's no visible obstruction that I'm able to find. So from that perspective, I don't have a repair to recommend to you. The first step in investigating a repair would be to reestablish records. That's where everything begins. I'm not sure where it ends, but that's where it begins here. Again, the engineering services, I think we've talked plenty about this. Kale, you covered most of this. It allows us to move forward with the DNR. Doesn't define a repair plan. It's only the first step. Total cost to get to repair, maybe, well, it is unknown at this point. Impact of lake property flooding specifically is unknown. We hear from Mr. Brady that certainly taking stuff out of the ditch, it's not going to hurt. There is a cost to that of $12,000 plus staff surveying, which kind of brings me to the end. We're at this point looking to the Board of Commissioners acting as a drainage authority for a little guidance here. From a staff perspective, I'm at a standstill. I can't move anything forward. We're either accepting the inspection report and taking no further action, or you may direct staff to hire an engineer to reestablish those records for CD28. And as a Board of Commissioners, you may have a third, fourth, or fifth option for me. But certainly if there's any questions Kale and I can answer, I'm trying to give you as much information as I can to help me create a path forward here, whether that path continues, whether it ends. I'm looking for a little guidance from the board today. Kale, do you have anything to add?
Commissioner Merrick.
Well, I was just going to suggest that there's obviously an issue out there, but piecemeal comes back to bite you. It doesn't work. You need to look at the whole system. That's why I asked way at the beginning about the issue of water coming from the southwest area. So, if you're looking at this area in between, there's a starting and an ending point, where I suppose some individuals that establish a floodplain or whatever the right terms are, whatever comes into the system is going to leave the system. And if you concentrate your efforts on cleaning out an area that's going to benefit some property owners and not others, then I think you're missing the boat. So I think you have, and I don't know how to do that. I don't know what the right way is to get to that. I can support something that's going to look at the entire system. I'd have difficulty supporting something that's going to do piecemeal. And so I don't know where we go from there with those comments.
Commissioner Notch.
My question would be, when you do, because you don't have an as-built, are you talking then, should you be doing the whole CD28 system? Or right now, your concentration, again, is probably just on part of it, which is the exiting of Two Rivers Lake.
The engineering guidance, Commissioner Notch, that I'm getting is you would have to look at the entire system.
So is that 12,000 the whole CD28?
That is my understanding.
Because you're going to have as-built
now.
on the lower, the Albany St. Martin side, as you will on the Holding Fort side.
No, because of the dynamic, it's a dynamic water system. It's a river. It's not even really a man-made ditch. Commissioner Merrick, to your point, I am in everything that the engineering experts have shared with me is it's a twofold process that repairing the ditch, although it may provide some relief, we don't know what the lasting impacts of the relief are. And if you're not doing anything like the SWCD is addressing with, you gotta prevent water from going in. To be honest, where I'm at with what I know, which granted I don't know everything about this, but if you think of it as a funnel, and you increase the spout of the funnel so you get 10% more flow out of it, that's good unless you're dumping a 5-gallon pail of water into it. There's a lot to consider here. I certainly understand where the lake property owners are coming from in that, with some of the flooding that they're describing and sending me pictures of, it's a terrible position. I'm not even sure what from a ditch perspective, Kale, we've had discussions. I don't even know if the ditch was ever engineered to even drain that part. It's difficult to even understand philosophically what is the role of the ditch. You don't want the ditch to cause problems, but I'm not sure it was ever there to fix them either. We just need more information. If we're, to do anything, we need more information.
Again, what Commissioner Merrick said about holding water back, this is a few years ago when I was heavy into this and I was doing some research and I can't remember the technical name for it, but I ran across something where they were digging what they call I think they were called just parallel ditches.
Oh, sure.
Where there's an overflow and it'll run over into those before it heads downstream. And there is an area south of Two Rivers that I think is a pasture area, but really, really low pasture area. Has anything been talked about as far as, and I don't know how well this would work, but in that area might be something to keep in mind too. And I don't know if the DNR would even have any objections to that. Is that something that could just be done?
I know between the respect study that SWCD did and some of the PCA and DNR sites they've identified, those are the types of opportunities, Commissioner Mergen, that are being looked at to mitigate those. I think if I could speak for SWCD, one of their challenges is all those opportunities are volunteer. Property owner has to volunteer to participate in that. So, I think there were 60-some mitigation projects that were identified in the SWCD report. And again, those were for clean water, but clean water fixes often tend to also, as a byproduct, help with holding water back. The trick is cost and getting property owners to get on board with you.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to point out all of those things are great discussion. They all go towards what's the scope of repair. And we as a board, you as a board, don't even get to that unless you go through this reestablishment process. So it might be that you go through it, you establish the ditch bottom, and then Commissioner Merrick would talk about, again, these patchwork fixes aren't in the necessary and best interest of everybody. Even if it's true that there's a foot of sediment in this one spot. The engineer then, as we talk about, well, what's the scope of repair we should consider after this establishment process, could guide the board in saying, you might spend this amount of money to fix that one spot, but it's only going to last a couple of years, and because of the water coming in from the south and southwest, it's really only going to have the most minute change. But all of that is related to scope. The engineers, if we're looking at a scoped repair, can consider property like that pasture area, Commissioner Mergen, that you talked about, and include that in a repair report as some kind of mitigation feature if there's cooperation from the landowners on a voluntary basis. But the starting point for any of those things is going to have to be, what is that established ditch bottom as constructed? That becomes the baseline of what you have authority to do on the system.
Okay. In that reestablishment, who pays for that? Does that get assigned back to the people that are under the benefited acres?
There is authority to do that, and maybe Commissioner Mergen, Chad can comment on that. My understanding is there may be some funds in the county that get allocated to help cover some of that, but under the Drainage Code, Chapter 103E, that does become a cost of everybody who's benefited on the system.
Yeah, what Kale's referring to is in the past, in different ditches, we have looked at some cost sharing with the system, in terms of how things get charged back. I just want to reiterate, too, that as staff, we never lose sight of the fact that anything we do in a ditch is going to spend other people's money. And so we always want to make sure it's an efficient use of money. And, the question, I hate to boil down personal problems people have with water in this way, but the reality is, with what we're charged with as a county and as a drainage authority, we have to look at a cost benefit of what the project is and what the results are going to be. Not making any judgment about whether it should or shouldn't go forward, but again, I think Kale's making the point that reestablishing records is the starting point. I would fully expect there to be additional engineering services beyond that. Whether there was cost sharing from some of the budget dollars we've used to support ditches in the past or not, to get where we need to go on this one will certainly exceed anything budgetary wise that we'd be able to. I mean, there's going to have to be cost back to the system to see this through.
Commissioner Notch.
Yeah, and that's was going to be my question is, if you do this RFP to get, engineering firms to reestablish this ditch bottom, and fortunately, unfortunately, it's going to go to the benefit of the owners who are on the list now because there's no redetermination of benefits, which I suppose that could occur later on if there is a potential repair possibility that might help the situation. But I think at this point, kind of still spinning our wheels unless we reestablish that ditch bottom. This will just probably keep coming forward all the time.
Just one other question then, similar to ditch 25, then do we have to have a public hearing in order to move this forward? Yeah.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, one other thing. Is there a process for people, I know there's some issues out here, who's in the benefited acres, who's not in the benefited acres. Is there a process for opting in, where people can opt their property into the benefited acres even though they aren't currently in there? Because that may be appropriate here in some instances.
Mr. Chair, I'll just cover on a couple ways that that's done. The first one, I'm just going to say the standard is no landowner should be making improvements to direct water towards the CD28 watershed without petitioning this board to come in. Things that are natural might not have been determined as benefited by the viewers, but artificial improvements should have been petitioned in. If things were done that weren't petitioned to you for your authority, and the Drainage Authority is aware of them, one of the options under 103E401 is to send them a notice saying you have until this date to petition in, or you have to block your improvements until you successfully petition in. One of the issues with petitioning in through that way is it's the burden of the petitioner to show, does the system have capacity to handle my improvements? And it sounds like there's a significant chance here that maybe some of the improvements happening upstream were done without consideration of, does CD28 have the capacity to handle those? A couple other ways that those landowners come in as benefited tax-paying landowners on the system are, if you do move forward and order an engineer to investigate a repair, and the engineer finds out there's landowners that benefit but aren't in the benefited area, the engineer is directed to create a report for you listing those lands and those property owners, so that you can have the option of slowing down the proceedings and essentially appointing viewers to bring those landowners in. And then the third way, Commissioner Merkin, as you mentioned, is you could just initiate a redetermination of benefits and ask viewers to look at that.
Could the property owners themselves say, hey, I should be in this benefited acres and I want to petition in?
Yes, Commissioner, and they would do that just through a petition under 401, like I mentioned.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Merrick.
Would option number one move in the direction that I've talked about looking at has the potential of moving us in that direction?
If you accept the findings in their inspection report as is, that would basically stop everything today.
Well, I don't think we should stop everything today. I think we should do something.
He's talking, there's an option one in the cover sheet that
is
to read.
Right, it's to approve the engineering.
Reestablish the bottom of the ditch.
To reestablish
Yes,
the ditch
I'm
bottom,
sorry.
ultimately submit to DNR for public waters permit. Would that move us in the direction that I've been talking about?
Commissioner Merrick, yes, it would. So the motion would basically result in Chad and I putting together a simple initiating resolution, I'll call it, where you'd be directing us to prepare a resolution that would give your staff the authority to go out and contract with this engineer to start this process.
Well, to move this along, I'm going to move that option.
No, second it.
Moved and seconded. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, Commissioners. I don't have anything else unless you have any other questions for me. Cale, do you maybe just want to summarize real quick, just for the record, what we just did?
Yes, Mr. Chair and Commissioners, we'll prepare a resolution for you to consider at your next meeting. That basically will create the record of the motion that you just made with the proper findings initiating this process. And then your staff will start to look for an engineering firm to contract with to start the investigation into the records and into the establishing that profile and right-of-way. Then the next time this will be before you is when that engineering report is ready for you to receive and set a public hearing where members of the public can come and make comments on the report.
And just so there's no confusion, this process won't establish repair locations or repair plan. This process won't do anything like that. It will just simply legally establish all the things Cale talked about. I just don't want there to be any misunderstanding
So you have a starting
about
point.
shoveling or anything like
Correct.
that.
Commissioner Notch.
Another question that just pops in that, along with that is then at some point when they research these records, do they look if buffers have been established and paid for and that all is part of that?
Yeah, correct. Mr. Chair and Commissioner Notch, that'll probably be some of the findings that we'll discover in their repair report. A 1906 ditch system, unless there's been improvements after that, or some appointment of viewers, it's unlikely that buffers were acquired on CD 28.
Having been out there, walked it, Kale, I think it's fair to say the entire ditch is buffered by a lot.
Naturally buffered, maybe not by easements.
Thank you.
Okay.
Anything else from you, commissioners?
A lot of changes in over 100 years, that's for sure.
Anything else?
No, I don't think there's anything else unless you want to talk about more ditches. But.
I don't think anybody wants me to talk about more ditches.
All right. Thank you, Chad.
Commissioners.
Thank you. Thank you, Carol.
Thank you.
We are up to item L, finally. Issues by commissioners. Commissioner Merrick.
I have one, and I've talked to Mike about this previously, and I don't know where we're at, but we had a presentation by I'm not sure what the title is, but by Deputy Dick House with the drones, and we had a presentation by Human Services, and we don't see that on our screen. We would see it here that's kind of at an angle, and sometimes it's down in front of us. Are we moving to a system where we can see it on our screens here?
Well, we had issues with the Commissioner, we had issues with the screens today. That's why we had some problems here, and there's more problems with this room that frustrate us all. I don't know that we've really we've explored that. You would need to have, in my experience, you would need to have a separate screen, separate from your laptop.
Okay.
But it could be done. I mean,
I think I would suggest that you look at something like that for the future, and I'm not sure when in the future, but something that's before us, so you can see it real easily, so you don't have to squint it. So it's before you all the time as these.
That's the problem.
Yeah.
The board room is going to be moving, right?
Yes.
So that would probably be
So-
when that occurs.
Yeah.
Yeah, we could have screens.
Mr.
in addition to
Persky?
your laptop.
I don't have anything other than I hope we can unofficially welcome spring to Stearns County.
Commissioner Knight.
Just a reminder, that we have that meeting Thursday night in Freeport for the township officers. Other than that, that's all I have.
All right. Mr. Williams? Nope. Okay. This meeting is adjourned.
Keep your finger away there.
I know.